Inside God's design attic. Inside God's design attic. Quick, quick, elixir. Cure, pill, medicine. Baime was carried into the God's design attic by someone else, but when she entered the God's design attic, her hands and feet became flustered. Several disciples hurried over. Some of them took the pills, and some of them took the gauze. However, Whitebrow didn't care about that much. Carry me to the top floor first. He wanted to keep an eye on the progress of the artifact forging ceremony. Long Fei leaned on the window and watched everything that happened in the plaza. He saw the white-browed blanket over the stage. Baime also looked at Long Fei. However, with just that one glance, his eyes filled with rage, as if it was Long Fei who had harmed him. It was because Long Fei, his master, did not come. She had a bit of resentment towards Long Fei between her eyebrows. However, he didn't reveal much. He knew that this world blamed others, so he might as well ask himself why he wasn't strong enough. Only the weak would find a reason to blame others. Long Fei looked at his furious eyes. He had witnessed everything that had happened downstairs. There was no admiration in his eyes, but his heart was moved. Has it begun? Has it begun? Abbot Whitebrow did not care about the wounds on his face. Looking out the window at the plaza, at the grand court facing the tens of thousands of people, he clenched his fists tightly. It's all my fault. If I could suppress my temper a little, Senior Brother wouldn't be under so much pressure. A disciple walked up and said, "Second Pavilion Master, heal pill." Abbot Whitebrow took it and swallowed it. A few disciples beside him also quickly bandaged him up, just that. Whitebrows frowned, but didn't let out any sound of pain as blood gushed out from the wound while he bandaged the wound. He stared at the gushing blood. The few disciples panicked more and more, and their tears almost came out. The level of the cure pill medicine is too low. No good pills. How could this be? Do you have any better pills? Hurry up and bring it over. A few of Second Pavilion Master's disciples cried. But the God's design attic was only refining, and no one understood alchemy. There were basically no good cure pill medicine here, and the pills they gave to Whitebrow were all low-grade pills. His injuries were extremely severe, and this kind of pill was completely useless. Abbot Whitebrow said with a deep voice, "Why are you panicking? Bring me more pills." A disciple frantically poured out a bunch of pills from the bottle, and when Abbot Whitebrow took it, he gulped it down like he was eating sugar beans. He bit it until it made a cracking sound, chewed it, and then swallowed it in one gulp. Couldn't help but be at a loss for words when he saw this. "Huff," Long Fei said lightly. "This kind of pellet's grade is too low. It doesn't matter how much you eat." Her white brows glanced at Long Fei and ignored him. One of the disciples by the side did not know of Long Fei's identity and said, "Do you have to say these words? Who doesn't know? However, what can you do without high-level pills?" "Exactly. Everyone knows this. Yet you're the one to say it." Originally, they were already angry and had nowhere to vent their anger on. Now that Long Fei had said this, they all started a vent. Abbot Whitebrow glared at them and shouted, "All of you, shut up." Cough, cough, cough. If he spoke too much, the wound would split open again and blood would immediately dye the gauze red. Black blood also leaked out of his mouth. Abbot Whitebrow's face paled. "Master! Martial Uncle! Master!" A few disciples began to worry. Long Fei really could not watch any longer. He took out a pellet from his space ring and said, "Eat it." Her white brows raised as she looked at Long Fei, then looked at the pill in his hand. A disciple said with caution, "What pill?" Long Fei was too lazy to explain and said, "You'll know once you eat it." The disciple continued, "What pill is this? Who the hell are you? Could you also be God Shribe's dog?" "Master, who is this kid?" "Exactly. What is a cultivation of warrior realm doing here?" "This is the artifact forging ceremony." "Is he an artificer?" "Brat, what are you doing here?" Many disciples questioned. Long Fei turned a deaf ear to them and ignored them. He said lightly, "If you want to get well immediately, then eat it. If you don't, then pretend that I never said anything." Whitebrow looked at Long Fei seriously and received the pill. "Master, we don't know his origins, so we can't eat randomly." "You're right. We didn't even find out this kid's identity." While they were talking, Abbot Whitebrow swallowed it. As the pill melted in his mouth, Abbot Whitebrow's pupils suddenly trembled. He abruptly shrunk his pupils. It let out a painful cry. The disciples around Long Fei immediately surrounded him. "What did you feed, Master?" Long Fei still did not explain. Abbot Whitebrow covered his face with one hand. His entire body was shaking. Even when his face was cracked, he didn't feel such pain. But now, he cried out involuntarily from the pain. His temper was so fierce that he wouldn't scream no matter how painful he was. But right now, he couldn't control it at all. What is it? This pill. Seeing how much pain his master was in, one of the disciples could no longer hold back and punched Long Fei. And at this moment, Abbot Whitebrow said with a heavy voice, "Stop." That person stopped and turned around to look at Abbot Whitebrow. "Teacher," Abbot Whitebrow stood up on his own. The bandages on his face fell off, and the torn flesh on his face completely recovered. There was even new flesh and blood, and even his bones had been repaired. In just a few seconds, all the injuries had healed. Abbot Whitebrow stroked his own face. The severe pain just now was due to the growth of his flesh and blood, which resulted in the sharp pain that came from the growth of his bones. "It's all right now, it doesn't hurt at all." Seeing that Abbot Whitebrow's injuries had recovered, the disciples were stunned. "This? Master, your injuries? What? Why is everything all right now? This?" He was stupefied, but his face remained as blank as ever. Abbot Whitebrow walked in front of Long Fei and asked, "Who are you?" He could be considered as someone who had seen much of the world. Even though he didn't know much about pills, he had never seen such a miraculous pill. Long Fei smiled faintly and said, "You should know very well who I am. God's design craftsman told you before." "Sure." Abbot Whitebrow didn't continue speaking. He still couldn't say the words ancestor master. He only bowed and said, "Thank you. Thank you for your emphasis." However, Abbot Whitebrow spoke sincerely. Seeing Abbot Whitebrow bow in gratitude, the disciples beside him immediately let go of their concern and bowed as well. "Thank you." Long Fei laughed. It was not intentional. Baimei glanced out of the window and turned to leave. He wanted to help the senior brother. Long Fei said faintly, "I think it's best if you don't go down there. Take a look first. I'll deal with it later." Abbot Whitebrow thought of his own violent temper. Worried that he would cause trouble again, he said, "If I don't go down to help, senior brother alone will not be able to handle so many artificers." Long Fei said, "You won't be able to handle it, even if you go down there. As your ancestor, how about I teach you a few moves? As your grandmaster, how about I use a few moves on you? As your grandmaster, how about I use a few moves on you?" The moment he said that, everyone stared at Long Fei with their eyes wide open. Originally, he had already put aside his concern for Long Fei, but after these words, what was this called? Calling himself Grandmaster? Isn't this playing with swords in front of Guangong? Even a crazy person had to have some sense, right? To say such words to the top refining master in universal realm, this was not arrogance. This was a little blind arrogance. What was this called? "Kid, do you know what you're saying? Don't think that just now, when you took the pill to save my master, you could have gotten even more out of it. Whose ancestor are you? Is there something wrong with your head? You know how to forge equipment too? You are just a dregs of the warrior realm. To put it bluntly, can you afford to use a crafting hammer?" Was extremely displeased with what Long Fei had just said. Baimei was actually very calm. Looking at Long Fei, she started to think about what her master had said. Long Fei said, "Your current refining level is at most at the same level as your senior brother, even if you go down. What can you do to help? You mainly cultivate refining. Where is your martial arts worth? How long can your spiritual energy last? If my guess is correct, the first step for God's tribe should be to take turns fighting. First, I will exhaust your refining pavilion's refiners to death one by one." The plaza was filled with the people of the God's tribe. Although the artificers brought by those Hegemon-level sects could not compare to the artificers brought by the elders of the God's design attic, they were not much weaker than them either. If they were to exhaust themselves one by one, the artificers of the God's design attic would definitely not be able to withstand the consumption. In the end, The God's tribe's artificers came out. Even if they couldn't, there were still the two boss-level powerhouses. God's design attic would definitely not be able to stop them. This way, it wouldn't help even if he had another white eyebrow. Abbot Whitebrow's brows tightened. A war of attrition. Long Fei said, "What do you think you can do to help?" The disciples all stared at Long Fei in displeasure. But Long Fei had completely ignored their words, causing them to be even more infuriated. Abbot Whitebrow exhaled deeply and asked, "What can you teach me?" Long Fei said, "I don't dare to say anything else. At least I can last until the end." A trace of light flashed across Abbot Whitebrow's eyes. "Really?" Long Fei replied. "Of course." Abbot Whitebrow said, "All right, teach me." Long Fei said, "For me to teach you, you must show some gratitude, right?" Abbot Whitebrow hesitated for a moment. Then he knelt on one knee and said, "Martial Ancestor, please instruct me." Very sincere. Each and every one of them looked at Long Fei in a daze and were a little unable to react. "Master this." Master, did you get it wrong?" Whitebrowed was a person who did not care about trifles. In the beginning, he did not place Long Fei in his eyes at all. Even though God's design craftsman had repeatedly said it, he still looked down on Long Fei and thought that he was useless. However, the pill Long Fei gave him calmed his heart down, and he calmed down to think again about what his master had said. If it was his master had said, then the kid in front of him must be unfathomable. This was also the reason why he asked for advice. And then again, S analysis was not bad. The reason why God's tribe came here this time was to deal with God's design attic. Their means were definitely despicable and shameless, and they would definitely do something. If it was a war of attrition, God's design attic would definitely not win. There was nothing he could do. Regardless of whether Long Fei had a way or not, he wanted to ask for help. Long Fei said, "Very good. Let your disciples go out. Their realms are not enough. They are unable to cultivate my secret technique." Abbot Whitebrow gave the order, "Everyone, get down." Many disciples left unwillingly. Long Fei said faintly, "The refining techniques that I am going to pass down to you is the ancient alchemy. I will only say it once. How much you can comprehend will depend on you." Abbot Whitebrow was startled. Ancient alchemy? Ancient worlds refining techniques. He was overwhelmed with shock. As expected, Bai's forehead shook. He is indeed unfathomable. No wonder Master made him substitute for me. I really have eyes, but can't recognize MT Tai. His heart tightened, and he became even more respectful to Long Fei. Long Fei said, "Yes, I remember. I also saw it clearly." Long Fei began to teach them. The ancient alchemy emphasized on the natural power of the natural Tao technique. It was a type of power within the ancient inheritance. He was ancient world's most primitive refining force. As long as they could grasp a bit of it, they wouldn't be able to deal with the two ancient bosses and shouldn't have any problem dealing with the presbyter of God's tribe. Initially, Long Fei wanted to pass down the refining techniques to the Horcrux's family, but Abbot Whitebrow had not been able to comprehend it yet. It was also the one that Long Fei was most familiar with, and it was convenient for him to impart it to others. The rites of heavenly worship was gone. Grand Court only wanted to welcome them as soon as possible. Use the raging, refining fire to extinguish the gods' tribe's arrogant flames. Thus, very quickly, over 100 refining platforms appeared on the plaza. The Grand Court said, "The annual artifact forging ceremony competition between God's design atticus will begin. Who can win to the end and become one of the 9 grand courtess of the God's design attic? I've obtained the divine fire of the heavenly secrets. Everyone, please begin." Before he could finish his words, Presbyter of God's tribe unceremoniously interrupted him again. "Grand Court, we have to change the rules for this year's refining competition." Grand Court suppressed his anger and said, "Elder, how do you want to change that?" Presbyter of God's tribe said, "You should also know that these people are all from my God's tribe, without any other factions. In other words, this year's refining competition is between my God's design attic and my God's tribe. A one-on-one duel. If he wins, he can continue on. If he loses, he can take the next spot. Until there's no one else. It was just as Long Fei had guessed. God's tribe doesn't even want to use normal methods to win against you. It was a conspiracy. There were so many artificers in God's tribe, adding up to no more than 100 disciples. How many people from the God's tribe were on the plaza? Over 10,000 people. This was even worse than killing God's design attic in a battle of attrition. Grand Court's eyes darkened and said, "Elder, I'm afraid this is not good, right?" Presbyter of God's tribe glared at him and said, "This is Emperor Xian's idea. Do you dare say it's bad?" Grand Court, don't give me a chance to go berserk. Otherwise, we don't need to have a competition in refining, and we can directly settle it by force. Haha. He looked like he was about to completely devour God's design attic. Grand Court said, "Elder, this is too time-consuming." Presbyter of God's tribe replied, "It doesn't matter, since I'm not in a hurry to do anything, I have plenty of time to do it." Grand Court still wanted to explain. However, the presbyter of God's tribe didn't even give him a chance and said, "Grand Court, this is the world of the God's tribe. Either you follow my God's tribe's rules, or I will follow another kind of rules of my God's tribe. If it wasn't for Emperor Xian giving you guys some face, do you think you would still be able to stand here and talk to me? You won today. Everything will be fine. If you lose, hee. You know the outcome, huh?" The sky was God's tribes. The sky was God's tribes. The ground was the God's tribes. Even the air was God's tribes. Call the God's tribe a rule? To challenge the God's tribe? I'm sorry, but we can either follow the rules of the God's tribe or just follow the methods of the God's tribe. The appearance of the God's tribe meant everything. Whatever I say is what I say. If you sing a different tune to me, your father, will go crazy. Who cares what kind of refining ceremony you are in? I'll just kill all of you God's design attic. Let's see how you're going to play with me. Grand Court was very clear on this point. If he wanted to save God's design attic today, the only way was to win. Victory to the end. Only by winning would the God's tribe have no reason to go berserk. However, this was an unfair competition. Want to win? It was too difficult. Forget about these tens of thousands of master artificers. Even the two ancient worlds had crushed his head like two mountains, causing him to be unable to breathe. However, if he wanted to save God's design attic, he could only win. Grand Court endured it heavily and said, "All right, let's follow the rules that the elders have set for us." "Elder, please begin." Presbyter of God's tribe smiled and said, "Let's begin." Fuck, isn't this too despicable? This way, God's design attic will really be forced to his death. There was originally a slight chance, but now it seems that there is no chance at all for God's design attic. I'm afraid even the refiners that God's tribe brought with him would not be able to make it out alive. The battle of attrition is so *king sinister. God's tribe is really shameless. Xiao Bai and the others said angrily. The elder swordsman said, "This way, most of the God's design attic's refiners will be exhausted. When the time comes, we will fight like vegetables being chopped from a radish, one at a time." Senior Mia asked, "Since when did God's tribe have such a group of sinister dogs?" Xiao Bai looked at them and asked, "What can we do?" The elder swordsman shook his head. "This is a refining competition. We do not understand refining. If we go out, it will only cause trouble for the God's design attic, and it will also cause the God's tribe to find excuses to go crazy." Sai Tandapeo sighed and said, "If only Boss was here, he could refine anything." That's right. If only Boss was here. He's a top-notch expert in smithing. "Boss, where are you?" "A choo-choo. Damn, which chick is missing me?" Long Fei sneezed 3 times in a row. He looked at every corner of the plaza and was disappointed. Li Yuanba did not appear. Xiao Bai and the others did not appear. Lan Mei, Su Su, they did not appear either. Long Fei muttered, "Where are you now? It can't be because no God's design token can enter, right?" Long Fei was also secretly worried in his heart, but now was not the time to be worried about this. As long as they were alive, they could find it. Right now, the most important thing for him to do was to deal with God's tribe and protect him. He came here to rebuild the Sky Sword. Before God's design craftsman can recreate his sky sword, he must protect them. Despicable God's tribe dog. It really is a war of attrition. Abbot Whitebrow glanced outside the window and gave a fierce shout. Long Fay glanced at her white brows and said, "Hurry up and cultivate. Don't waste time." Abbot Whitebrow nodded repeatedly. "Yes, yes. Martial ancestor, I will go right now." Actually, to the presbyter of God's tribe surprise, their battle of attrition was extremely beneficial to Long Fay. If the first explosion was like pulling apart rotten weeds, God's design attic would definitely not be able to handle it. However, the battle of attrition gave Long Fay enough time to train Abbot Whitebrow. Bai Mei was the peak refiner of the universal realm. His comprehension and aptitude both exceeded Long Fay's expectations, and his cultivation speed was extremely fast. He only had a little more time before he could advance. This was the accumulation of many years of artifact forging. It was just like how, in the past, he had only practiced the basics. Now that he had reached the advanced realm, he was naturally much faster. God's design attic wins. Next, God's design attic wins. Next, one after another, master refiners came forward to challenge the other. These master refiners from the hegemon level sects were not weak, and the master refiners of God's design attic would have to waste a lot of energy to deal with them. After several consecutive rounds, his physical and mental strength had reached the point where he was unable to endure even spirit energy. God's tribe wins. Next, another elder of the God's design attic walked down, his head lowered in dejection as he looked at Grand Court and said, "Grand Court, I am useless. This method of theirs is simply too much." Grand Court comforted her. "It's fine, go to the side and rest." Refining spiritual power required a high degree of concentration. After a few rounds, his spirit power couldn't hold up any longer. It didn't matter if he lost, but this loss would cast a psychological shadow over every refiner, and the path of the refining process in the future would become even more difficult. God's design attic wins. Next, God's design attic wins. Next, a few presbyter of God's tribes were seated on their teachers' chairs, waving fan in their hands as they smiled proudly. They were not concerned about the results of the competition at all, as they knew what the final outcome would be. God's tribe wins. Next, another presbyter of God's tribe was defeated. His face was pale, and he gasped for breath. Presbyter of God's tribe mocked, "Grand Court, you are just like that as a master refiner. After a few rounds, you're already exhausted, like a piece of trash. Ah." The elder glared at him furiously. Presbyter of God's tribe sneered and said, "What about you? You're still admitting to being a trash?" "Trash." He spat out a mouthful of blood and fainted on the spot. Every single refiner who entered the God's design attic was a genius refiner, and all of them were a little proud. It also had a huge impact on other weapons craftsmen. Grand Court's eyes darkened, and he said, "Maintain your heart." Presbyter of God's tribe sneered and said, "Keep your guard up, hurry up, and call your men over." God's design attic wins. God's design attic wins. God's tribe wins. Next, every 10 rounds, there would be one elder from God's design attic who would lose. In this way, the God's design attic would lose without even needing to be an artificer. Moreover, every elder on the God's design attic side had done their best and had exhausted themselves. It would take them at least 3 days to recover. But 3 days was too long. After a full day, there were only 10 elders left on the side of the God's design attic. On the other side, the elders of the God's design attic were all panting heavily as they were unable to recover at all in a single day. But there is still more than half of the 10,000 refiners here. God's tribe wins. Next, presbyter of God's tribe laughed coldly and said, "Grand Court, send someone to compete with us." There were only a few pavilion masters left. He was also a master refiner at the peak of God's design attic. Grand Court's expression darkened. With a ball of fire burning in his heart, he said heavily, "I'll do it." The battle of attrition was too despicable. The battle of attrition was too despicable. However, you know you're despicable but there's nothing you can do. The 100 over-refiners in the God's Design attic lost, not in terms of technique, but in terms of numbers. If 10,000 would not work, then 1,000,000,000,000 would die, crippled or not. Every single refiner who had lost was exhausted mentally and physically, and they were gasping for breath on the side. It would take a very long time before they could recover. The pride of the presbyter of God's tribe. The faces of those weapons craftsmen of the sex were full of mockery. The anger in Grand Court could not take it anymore, and he shouted, "Let me!" Presbyter of God's tribe immediately said, "Good, good, good, this Grand Court is finally going to show his skills. I really want to wait and see, huh?" He was waiting for the Grand Court to fight. Second Pavilion Master was already crippled. The remaining powers of these Pavilion Masters were all just average. At most, they were just slightly stronger than the artificers they brought with them, and wouldn't be a threat at all. Only the Grand Court. If they beat him to the ground, the God's Design attic would definitely lose. It had to be known that there were still thousands of artifact forging masters behind him. No matter how powerful Grand Court was, it was impossible for him to win against so many people. Once he lost, there would be no God's Design attic left in this world. He didn't even need to use the Destruction Realm Spear. Senior brother, senior brother. Several Pavilion Masters took a step forward and said, "Senior brother, let's fight first." "Right, let's fight first. You will be the final one. We can't even deal with those blacksmiths from the God's tribe with much difficulty. If you are the last one, we will exhaust all of you no matter what." "I'll do it." As he spoke, a Pavilion Master walked out. Presbyter of God's tribe sneered and said, "You said you can go up if you want to? Who do you think you are?" "Grand Court, you said you were going to fight. You wouldn't go back on your word, right? This is the sin of deceiving our God's tribe, the crime of deceiving the monarch. You know the consequences, right?" Presbyter of God's tribe smiled faintly as he looked at Grand Court. He was just not going to let the Grand Court have a way out. He wanted to use the sea of men to crush him. So what if he was Universal Realms #1 refiner? Is it worth 5,000 refining Chief Master S? You'll die from exhaustion. Grand Court took a step forward and said solemnly, "Come." Walking up the refining platform, Grand Court said to his junior behind him, "I will fight first. You guys support him. I believe in you." And then, Grand Court made a gesture to the refiners on the opposite refining platform. "Let's begin." The corner of Presbyter of God's tribe's mouth curled up, and he spoke with a tone like an old eunuch. "Let's begin." Boom! The refining fire on Grand Court's body instantly burst forth, igniting the flames in the furnace. With a flip of his hand, the artifact forging hammer in his hand struck out fiercely. Bang, bang, bang. A few seconds later, the refining fire on Grand Court's body extinguished and the fire died down. The entire audience was stunned. Presbyter of God's tribe's pupils also shrank as he stared at the pill refined by Grand Court. With the flickering of his eyes, he could tell that it was not an ordinary item. Inwardly, he was overwhelmed with shock. Refining a divine treasure in just a few seconds? How strong was this? The level of this refining techniques is simply unmanned. Isn't it too fast? The refiner opposite us has yet to even start fire. Holy sh*t. Is this still something a human can do? Impossible. It's too fast. Fuck, this isn't even human. I didn't even get a good look. Is this the level of the #1 blacksmith in Universal Realm? The entire audience was shocked. It was an incomparable shock. Grand Court's technique was too fast. He could not even see what Yin-Che had just done. The artificer on the other side of a refining platform was even more dumbfounded. Just now, when he had taken out his crafting hammer, the other side had agreed upon it. The mighty Grand Court. The mighty Grand Court. The elder from the God's Design attic shouted loudly, venting the anger in his heart. Godly speed refining technique. Senior brother is indeed a senior brother. To think that he actually grasped a refining techniques at lightning speed. It's really powerful. The senior brother is truly mighty. Abbott Whitebrow glanced at the window. Incomparable excitement. Long Fame muttered, "Godspeed refining technique?" Whitebrow said, "You didn't see it clearly just now, did you?" This is the refining techniques that the senior brother created himself. In the past, the senior brother only wanted to save some time, but he never thought that it would actually have such a miraculous use today. It's really amazing. This kind of refining techniques use speed to decide everything. It all depended on speed. From the burning of the fire to the end of the refining process, everything had been completed in one go, without the slightest pause in between. One quick, Long Fei said lightly, "Its speed is indeed fast, but this method of refining would probably require a lot more energy to complete, right?" Abbot Whitebrow was stunned. "I don't know about that." Long Fei glared at him and said, "Since you don't know, then why don't you quickly go cultivate with me? Hurry up. You don't have much time left. If you keep on slacking off, you better be careful of my master's anger." Abbot Whitebrow retracted his neck, then immediately ran to another side to train. Long Fei looked out of the window with interest at the Grand Court and muttered to himself, "Divine speed refining techniques. This skill is indeed not bad. It can save a lot of time. Let's see if I can control it." Long Fei's eyes moved. His pupils turned into flames. Eyes become the mode of the fiery eyes of truth. The power of the fiery eyes of truth could see through everything, as could its speed. If Grand Court were to once again use the fast refining method, he would be able to see every single movement clearly. Long Fei wanted to copy the refining techniques at lightning speed. "Bring it on. Let's start again." Presbyter of God's tribe's eyes turned slightly sinister. God's tribe's limelight had been crushed by him, causing his expression to turn unhappy, but he was not anxious. He coldly said, "As expected of Grand Court, you are truly extraordinary." He actually managed to refine a divine treasure in such a short period of time. "Amazing, amazing." With a slight movement of his finger, he said, "Next one." A master refiner stepped onto the refining platform. Grand Court made the same polite gesture as before. "Please, let the duel begin." Grand Court made another series of beautiful movements. In one breath, bang, 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 completed. The flames of refinement on Grand Court's body extinguished and the aura on his body calmed down. Yet another godlike speed. Under the fiery eyes of truth, everything was being played slowly. This speed was too fast. Long Fei secretly thought, he really is fast. Even though he was using the fiery eyes of truth slowly, he was still unable to see everything clearly. He thought to himself, "I don't believe this." Presbyter of God's tribe laughed coldly, and his finger spoke again in a feminine tone. "Next, God's design addict wins. Next, God's design addict wins. Next, God's design addict wins. Next." The wild victory that he had received along the way, and the crushing of everything, were all completely performed by the Grand Court alone. It was too fast. It was too fast. It was so fast that those refining masters from the sects lined up one by one. But just as they steadied themselves, they lost. They had no idea how they had lost. The Grand Court didn't even give them a chance. Each time was completed in one go. Every single time, a divine treasure would be created. Compared to that, it was like the Grand Court pressing you down on the ground and rubbing it with all his might. You couldn't even move at all. God's design addict wins. Next, God's design addict wins. Next, the sex artificers kept on walking, and then kept on walking. They could only stand on the refining platform for a few seconds, and then lose. In just 2 short hours, more than 1,000 refiners had been defeated. 10 hours was more than enough time for 5,000 refiners. The most important thing was, Grand Court's breathing was stable, his face was not red, and his heartbeat did not accelerate. 2 hours of high-speed refining did not exhaust him at all, so it was not difficult to last 10 hours in this situation. Presbyter of God's tribe's gaze darkened. Although he was shocked, he also hated them even more. This was because the aura coming from Grand Court was simply too strong. The sex artificers that he brought were simply like ants that had been completely crushed by the Grand Court's aura. Even if they could refine now, they wouldn't be able to produce anything good. Not only that, the artificers of the God's tribe were also being crushed by the aura of the Grand Court. This speed, this level was too strong. God's design attic wins. Next, with another heavy sound, Presbyter of God's tribe clenched his fists tightly and said solemnly, "A bunch of useless trash." Everyone on the God's design attic was excited. Grand Court is indeed Grand Court. He really is amazing. This achievement probably won't lose to the God's design craftsman back then, right? Murong Xiong let out a faint sound. Looking at Grand Court's performance, he was also incomparably shocked in his heart. Li Yuanba said, "His consumption." Murong Xiong nodded and said, "You can tell. It looks like his breathing is stable, his breathing is flat, but his energy consumption is very serious. Although he uses a few seconds of time to recover every time, he is, after all, just an artificer, not a martial arts training practitioner. A few seconds of recovery is nothing to him." Presbyter of God's tribe only sensed that Grand Court's aura was stable and thought that it did not cause any consumption. But if not, Grand Court's consumption would be extremely huge. After 2 hours, more than half of his profound qi had been consumed. There were still more than 4,000 blacksmiths who wanted to persevere. To him, this was an enormous test. Li Yuanba said, "He probably wants to do in one go just that. I wonder how much longer he'll be able to last." Murong Xiong said faintly, "It's good that I can persevere for a long time. What I'm worried about now is whether or not God's tribe can come up with some scheme. If their limelight was crushed like this, where would the face of the God's tribe go?" Every one of the Presbyter of God's tribes had an ugly expression on their face. Under the Grand Court's quick refining techniques, the people they brought were like idiots. They lined up one by one, and then lined up one by one. If he wasn't an idiot, then what was he? Where's the might of the God's tribe? What was the face of the God's tribe? If this matter were to be found out by the elders of the shrine, and the Emperor Xian found out, they would definitely be punished. A few Presbyter of God's tribes looked at each other, then squinted. It was also at this time. God's design attic wins. Next, one of the Presbyter of God's tribe slowly stood up and walked towards the refining platform. Everyone shivered. Is Presbyter of God's tribe going to fight? Presbyter of God's tribe can't watch this any longer. Haha. Presbyter of God's tribe is going to make his move. This time, I can directly kill his prestige. The numerous artificers were all suppressed to the point where they couldn't even breathe after being pressured by the Grand Court's divine speed forging method. They felt extremely uncomfortable. Seeing Presbyter of God's tribe walk out, their hearts slightly relaxed. But the most puzzling thing was that this Presbyter of God's tribe held a weapon in his hand and walked up to the refining platform. This weapon was not a hammer. So what was he trying to do? Everyone was puzzled. Grand Court said lightly, "Elder, after you." Presbyter of God's tribe also sneered and said, "Please." Grand Court did not think too much about it. The refining platform was a place where weapons were refined. He had spent his entire life refining. And when he stood on the refining platform, he was a completely different person. With his 120,000 points of penetration, unless the refining was complete, he would not relax even a little. Such people were born to do only one thing. Moreover, when he was doing it, he was at the level of one with the world. He would ignore everything that was happening in the outside world. The refining fire on his body moved. He had once again entered into the realm of artifact forging. But at this moment, one of the pavilion masters from the God's design attic widened his eyes as he shouted, "Grand Court, be careful." The weapon in the hands of the God's tribe's refiner smashed down heavily, and a huge power exploded out from the tip of the spear. Grand Court raised his eyes. Seeing that Presbyter of God's tribe was going to fight, he wanted to be even faster and use this speed to ruthlessly crush Presbyter of God's tribe. This time he was even faster. However, he did not expect that the Presbyter of God's tribe was not here to forge artifacts, but was instead here to take his life. He flipped the holy artifact that he had refined. Buzz, protect in front of your body. The power from the powerhouse of God's tribe's weapon shot out, striking the holy artifact he was refining and producing an explosive sound. Rumble, rumble. A violent explosion sounded. Grand Court was immediately blasted away. Bang. He heavily smashed onto the ground. causing the ground to crack. Grand Court's body bounced as he spat out a mouthful of black blood. Everyone from God's Design Attic rushed forward. Grand Court, Grand Court, Senior Brother, God's Tribe, aren't you guys going too far? Their eyes were all filled with rage. That presbyter of God's tribe splayed his hands, made an innocent expression, and said, "Refining failure. It was definitely a refining error. I don't want to be like this, but everyone has their own mistakes. You guys are all refiners. Don't you guys have your own mistakes?" A mistake. You call that a mistake? You attacked the Grand Court the moment you started. What kind of mistake is this? Is that what you call deliberately doing? The pavilion masters were infuriated. The presbyter of God's tribe immediately said, "You should be careful with your words. How did I do that on purpose? If I say I made a mistake, then it's a mistake. At worst, I'll just lose this match. You aren't letting us make any mistakes." He had a complacent look on his face. The presbyter of God's tribe stood up. His face was filled with a cold smile, and he said, "There are mistakes, everyone. Grand Court has already won. Grand Court can stand up and continue. If he can't get up, then he's a replacement." Ha ha, ha ha ha. The people of Presbyter of God's tribe and the sects all laughed loudly. He was laughing with incomparable joy. Fighting with the God's tribe? Do you know how to write the word die? These people who came to the God's Design Attic did not think that they could use normal methods to win against the God's Design Attic. These people who came to the God's Design Attic did not think that they could use normal methods to win against the God's Design Attic. They only wanted the result. The process didn't matter. Anyway, with history in the hands of the powerhouse, what could the process do? This world was a place where the strong preyed on the weak, and the powerhouse was the king. Since you choose to fight with the God's tribe, then make all the preparations. God's tribe's actions made everyone in the God's Design Attic unhappy. Seeing that Grand Court was heavily injured, all of them gritted their teeth, wishing that they could pounce over and fight to the death. As long as the people of the God's Design Attic dared to make a move, then this refining competition would be spared. This was the result that the people of God's tribe wanted to see. Presbyter of God's tribe laughed coldly and said, "What? All of them looked like they wanted to eat someone? You want to make a move against me? Come on, I'll sit here. Make your move. Hurry up and make your move." He had an expression that made one want to slap him a few times. A few bloodthirsty God's Design Attic disciples could not hold it in any longer. Grand Court crawled up heavily from the ground and said with a deep voice, "Refining continue." He said in a low voice to the pavilion master beside him, "Let them not move recklessly. If they attack, we would not have any chance." While they were talking, step by step, he returned to the refining platform. It was just that. His face became very pale. The corners of the presbyter of God's tribe's mouth hooked up as he sneered. "You aren't even dead? Grand Court, your life is really tough." Grand Court said lightly, "Elder, continue." Presbyter of God's tribe's gaze turned sinister as he said in a heavy tone, "Continue. This old man wants to see how long you can hold out for." He once again returned to the refining competition. Those weapons craftsmen from the sects walked forward one by one. The refining fire on Grand Court surged. Boom. It was a little messy, not as smooth as it had been in the beginning. Moreover, his breathing was ragged. Presbyter of God's tribe laughed sinisterly. "I thought you weren't injured. I want to see just how long you can hold on. Just you wait till you die." Very difficult. Every step Grand Court took was now extremely difficult. But even if it was even more difficult, he had to persevere and at the very least defeat these sect weapons craftsmen. Even if he lost, he had to lose with dignity and lose so that the whole world would remember this place. And remember this place, God's Design Attic. This was what Grand Court wanted to do now. Fight for reputation. God's Design Attic wins. Next, God's Design Attic wins. Next, another series of victories. Although Presbyter of God's tribe and the rest were unhappy, they all had gloomy expressions. They knew that Grand Court would definitely not be able to hold on for long. This is King bullying. Do these God's tribe dogs care about face? I'm ashamed of them all. I can't take it anymore. Xiao Bai and the others clenched their fists tightly, wanting to rush out and give that presbyter of God's tribe a good beating. He had seen bullies, but he had never seen one. How infuriating! The elder swordsman said in a deep voice. Even though the Grand Court used his holy artifact to block off some of the energy was God's tribe's power. The Grand Court's internal organs were shattered quite a bit. He is currently burning his own life force to block. I'm afraid he won't be able to hold on for long. Senior Mia said, "We should also make the arrangements." Xiaobai took the lead and said, "I will kill the elder who spoke those words. I will definitely tear his mouth to shreds. Let's see what he will say in the future." Ice and Fire said, "The one I have." They knew that they might all die after this battle. However, he had to fight. What was the point of living like this? In this world, living is one thing. If you're unhappy, then living isn't that fun either. They were ready. Prepare for battle. Murong Xiong said slightly, "Just as I expected, God's tribe dogs are God's tribe dogs. Dogs can't stop themselves from eating feces. They can even use such a despicable method. Looks like I still have to use force to settle everything. Haha. However, I like this method of resolving things." Li Yuanba glanced at Qing Yi, who was beside him. Qing Yi chuckled lightly. "I am your woman. Whatever you do, I will follow. You don't need to worry about me." She loved the big man in front of her. Deep love. No matter who Li Yuanba wanted to deal with, she would stand by Li Yuanba's side. Although the God's tribe raised her, she died because of him. This was the second time that someone she deeply loved had given her life after her revival. None of these people caused her to have any feelings for the God's tribe. So when she saw everything that happened in front of her, she saw the ugliness of the God's tribe. This way, she wouldn't have to worry about him anymore. Murong Xiong smiled lightly and said, "I really envy the two of you. I need to hurry and find a woman. Only then will I be able to be more eye-catching." "All right, there's still some time left. You can do whatever you want to do. I'll arrange it for you." Murong Xiong gave an evil expression and disappeared into the void. Qing Yi's face reddened. Li Yuanba said naively, "What are you doing?" Qing Yi lightly leaned against Li Yuanba's shoulder and softly said, "You can do anything you want." Li Yuanba said, "I don't want to do anything." Qing Yi pouted, "Big stupid cow." God's design attic wins. Next. God's design attic wins. Next. He was still winning, and his speed was even faster. An hour passed. Grand Court was still on refining platform, still winning. 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours passed. Grand Court was still holding on, but his chest was covered in the blood that was coming out of his mouth. His body was on the verge of collapse several times. However, he was still trying his best to persevere. The entire plaza became incomparably quiet as everyone looked at Grand Court. Boom! God's design attic wins. Next, he had one another one, and at this time, he had already supported himself with exactly 10 novels in the refining platform. One man against thousands. Just how terrifying was this existence? Although those who lost didn't do anything on the stage, they were convinced. There were no complaints. He also secretly admired Grand Court in his heart. However, so what if he admired her? Grand Court was at most a formidable person, but in the end, she would still be eliminated, and in the end, the God's design attic would still be defeated. Grand Court stared at Presbyter of God's tribe and said, "Clan Elder, continue." Presbyter of God's tribe's eyes became gloomy. He stood up and swept his eyes over the sex artificers who had lost and coldly said, "A bunch of useless things." Hugging his hands, his joints creaked loudly. He stepped forward. Walking to the front of a refining platform, he stared at him and laughed sinisterly. "Grand Court, let's begin." Presbyter of God's tribe made his move. Presbyter of God's tribe made his move. The entire arena suddenly quieted down. Everyone's eyes were focused on Presbyter of God's tribe. Grand Court looked at the great clan elder with a calm gaze and made an inviting gesture with his hand, saying, "Please." Presbyter of God's tribe's lips drew back into a smile. "Grand Court is truly amazing. With this godlike crafting method of yours, I can give you another chance to choose again." One man against thousands of people. These thousands of people were all artificers at the peak of universal realm, but they were all defeated by him. In other words, the Grand Court alone was worth as much as the artificers of the entire universal realm. He was sufficient in the God's tribe. This kind of talent should be controlled by the God's tribe. If he couldn't control it, without waiting for Grand Court to speak, he seriously spoke again. Don't be in a hurry to answer. You better think about it carefully. Grand Court slightly said, There is no need to think about it, Elder, please. A gesture of invitation. That was the answer. Presbyter of God's tribe squinted and sneered. There is only one path. Since you have chosen a path of death, then prepare to go to hell. As soon as he finished speaking, the refining fire on Presbyter of God's tribe's body instantly ignited. Boom! It was dozens of feet tall and had a unique elemental energy. The power of the God's tribe. It's the power of the God's tribe. What a powerful refining fire. I have never seen such a powerful refining fire, as if it could melt the entire world. The God tribe blood vein is just different. All kinds of praises and praises could be heard, although it was somewhat exaggerated, but his refining fire was indeed powerful, and with the power of the God's tribe added on, it made his refining fire even sharper, as though it carried the majesty of a God's tribe. Under the presbyter of God's tribe's refining fire, the refining fire that the Grand Court had released seemed to be constantly shrinking, as if it was afraid. Presbyter of God's tribe laughed coldly and said, Let's begin. Boom! Refining fire whizzed out, instantly raising the temperature of the fire to its highest point. Then, with a flip of his right hand, a purplish gold hammer appeared. Purple Sky Hammer. It's the top-grade holy artifact in the forging hammer. Wow! It should be a legendary divine object. The holy artifact with the highest level of artifact forging actually appeared. God's tribe is powerful. Rumor has it that the things that are forged with the purple heaven hammer are all holy artifact. Not only that, it can also release a threatening aura of artifact forging with a powerful attack. He is a hammer refiner and also a weapon. Just as everyone was discussing. Boom! The purple sky forging hammer landed. Rumble! Flames flew in all directions as a refining force swept out. Grand Court reacted extremely quickly as he grabbed a piece of deep-sea mysterious iron to protect himself. The moment the force attacked, the dark steel instantly shattered. Grand Court was forced back a few steps. His internal organs were all churning, blood was stinging at the nose, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. Senior brother. Grand Court. Many disciples of God's design addicts stepped forward. Grand Court said solemnly, I'm fine. I underestimated the power of the presbyter of God's tribe. I never thought that the purple heaven hammer would be able to release such a powerful refining force. Presbyter of God's tribe laughed disdainfully. Grand Court, where is your divine speed refining technique? Why didn't you use it? Before he could finish his words, the purple sky hammer moved again. Rumble! Another extremely strong refining force burst out. He rushed towards the Grand Court. Grand Court frowned. We can't defend against it. Then let's fight. The refining hammer in his hand moved, and the refining fire on his body released a demon beast's roar, immediately combusting. Rumble! His body felt like it was possessed by a wild beast. The crafting style had also suddenly and drastically changed. From the rapid crafting at the beginning to the incomparable mania, it was as if a calligrapher was writing wild grass. He was uninhibited and unrestrained. At this moment, this was the case for Grand Court. The refining force on his body surged, and in the face of the refining force released by the presbyter of God's tribe, he also smashed down with his hammer. A sweep. Buzz. An ear-piercing buzzing sound could be heard. It was like a flood dragon out at sea, rampaging about. The two weapons' crafting energies collided. Buzz. A dull humming sound rang out as rings after rings collided before heavily overlapping each other. Presbyter of God's tribe's gaze turned cold, and his heart fiercely snorted. Let me see how long you can hold out for. Boom! The purple sky forging hammer fell. The refining force swept over with the might of a god's tribe. An even stronger force charged forward. The space between Grand Court's eyebrows tightened as the aura around his body surged. The hammer in his hand also smashed down fiercely. With a roar, the lightning struck. Rumble. They collided once again. Overlapping his strength, he crazily twisted. Space itself began to crack. The surrounding people were all stunned. They were all scared silly. Why had they ever seen a refining competition like this? Too strong. The kind that was strong enough to explode. Long Fei looked at Grand Court from the window and was secretly shocked in his heart. He's really strong. If he wasn't injured, Presbyter of God's tribe would not have been his match. But Zhang Xian frowned. Long Fei looked at the white brows in the room. Xiao Bai was shocked. Grand Court is so strong. He can't even hold on for much longer. He single-handedly crushed thousands of people. Right now, not even the Presbyter of God's tribe can withstand it. To have reached this level of refining, it truly surpasses one's imagination. Ever since God's Design Attic was founded, she has always been at the forefront of the refining world. Senior Mie said, Grand Court is indeed strong, but God's tribe will not allow himself to lose. Elder Swordsman was stunned. Rumble. The purple heavenly hammer was knocked down once again. Presbyter of God's tribe's face was pale. Cold sweat rolled down his forehead like rain. His expression was pained. He was on the verge of collapsing. But how could God tribe lose? He couldn't lose even one match. Out of the corner of his eyes, not far behind him, the chi of a presbyter of God's tribe suddenly stirred. Elder Swordsman said in a hoarse voice, small. The words had not left his mouth yet. The power of the Yin wind struck right at Grand Court's chest. Puffed. He spat out a mouthful of black blood. His chest had been pierced through, and there was a hole the size of a fist in it. At this moment, the purple sky hammer in the hands of the artifact forging presbyter of God's tribe once again heavily smashed down. Go and die. Grand Court's face turned as pale as thin paper. Seeing the incoming energy, he didn't retreat a single step. The hammer in his hand smashed down heavily. Bang, bang, bang. He did not release the refining force, but continued to refine weapons. When that powerful force reached his body, the Grand Court smiled and said, Okay. Boom. Power exploded out from his body, causing his body to slowly crack apart. Grand Court stood there motionlessly. Grand Court stood there motionlessly. There was a smile on his face. His body started to crack bit by bit, and light was emitted from the crack. Long Fei looked at the wound on his head and sighed, AI. It was also at this time, when Presbyter of God's tribe's hammer fell, the material under his hammer shattered into pieces, and the artifact forging failed. Grand Court smiled faintly and said, You've lost. Presbyter of God's tribe's gaze turned sinister as he looked at the piece of trash underneath the hammer. He shouted, You dog, so what if you win? Boom! A heavy hammer smashed down. Bam! Yet another extremely strong refining force was released. In itself, Grand Court was already at the end of his wits and was about to die. The Presbyter of God's tribe did not let him off. He just smashed down with his hammer. Was to not give the Grand Court any chance of survival. It had always been the God's tribe that bullied people. No one had ever dared to win against the God's tribe. Presbyter of God's tribe laughed coldly, looked at Grand Court, and said, Go to hell. If this strike were to strike again, Grand Court would definitely die. In front of the God's tribe, who dared to block this power? God's Design Attic was a group of artificers. They simply did not have the strength to resist it. Thus, in the eyes of Presbyter of God's tribe, Grand Court was already a dead man. However, the air moved slightly, and like a cool breeze blowing, a series of spatial ripples faintly appeared in front of Presbyter of God's tribe. Next, buzz. The power released by the hammer of refinement was completely absorbed by a special spatial fluctuation. Gone. All his strength vanished. Long Fei was shocked. The power of spatial displacement. That's not right. Divine power. Long Fei's pupils tightened. The system had changed. But his blood veins' power had not changed at all. His blood could still release the power of spatial displacement. He didn't have much control over the power of space. But he was 100% sure that the force just now was the shift in space. Shifting his strength to another world, this move. Too awesome. It was Long Fei's first time seeing someone who could release the power of space to such a level. Everyone was stunned. Presbyter of God's tribe was also startled. But the moment his anger was burning, he did not think too much, and the purple sky hammer moved again, smashing down fiercely. Buzz! A purple refining force. Moreover, this move had the power of a stronger God's tribe. Presbyter of God's tribe bellowed, "You dog, go to hell!" Rumble! Purple energy flames surged out, like a wave shooting out. The refining platform was torn into pieces, and sand and rocks flew everywhere. It was hard to open one's eyes. Presbyter of God's tribe stared deadly at him. Grand Court laughed bitterly. He couldn't stop it. Right now, his internal organs were all rupturing, and his body was cracking. Not to mention this kind of power, any kind of power could take his life. But yet another spatial ripple. Buzz! It was like a cool breeze blowing past. Then, all the energy in the presbyter of God's tribe disappeared. It was like a gale that suddenly stopped and became calm. Presbyter of God's tribe's eyes darkened. Just as he was about to make his move again, a presbyter of God's tribe walked out and said with a deep voice, "The power of space in the Mu clan is able to easily transfer its power to another world." Presumably, the person who came here would be the current patriarch of the Mu clan, Morong Xiong, right? As soon as he finished, the expressions of the surrounding people secretly changed. Morong Xiong, the great tyrant from the Xiaoyao city. The monster, that monster. The people from Mu clan are here too. The Mu clan was the ancient family. It was also the family of the ancient world. His name shook the entire universal realm. It was also one of the most mysterious families. The people of Universal Realm all knew about the Xiaoyao city, but no one knew the exact location of the Xiaoyao city. Some people said that it was in the sky, some people said that it was underground, and some people said that it was in the ocean. No one could pinpoint his location correctly. This was also the reason why God's tribe had always been helpless against Xiaoyao city. It was because of the power of space. The inheritance power of the ancient world s. Ha ha. Ha ha ha. As the space shifted, Murong Xiong walked out of the spatial space with a slight smile. I didn't expect that the lofty presbyter of God's tribe would actually know about me, Murong Xiong. When the elder refining saw Murong Xiong walking out, he immediately shouted and said, "Murong Xiong, do you dare to interfere in the matters of the God's tribe?" Murong Xiong looked at him coldly and said, "Tisich, so what if you're God's tribe? When my Mu clan was born, I didn't even know what kind of dog was hiding inside. You dare insult God's tribe? I think you're sick of living." Elder Refining replied heavily. It was just that, not waiting for him to finish. The air behind him suddenly turned black, and chaotic law of space struck out. Murong Xiong lightly tapped it with his finger. Buzz! The dark space immediately swallowed the elder refining, leaving only his head outside. Murong Xiong laughed. "What did you say just now? What's wrong with me? It was just a head at God's design attic, and the rest of the bodies were all in another space." Everyone panicked, and their faces turned pale. The scene was somewhat panicked. But, even so, the two veiled ancient strong did not move. They were like two wooden logs, not caring about the life and death of presbyter of God's tribe at all. This made Murong Xiong's heart sink even more. "You aren't even making a move?" Damn, where did these two monsters come from? When Elder Refining saw that half of his body was gone, he was so scared that sweat started to appear on his forehead. Like a spring, he anxiously said, "I was wrong. I was wrong. Murong Xiong, please let me go. I won't dare to do it again. Just take me for a fart. Go ahead." Nothing was more important than his life. The reputation of the God's tribe? Compared to his life, it was just bullsh asterisk T. Murong Xiong ridiculed. "Please? Isn't your God's tribe awesome? Begging for forgiveness doesn't seem like your style." Isn't a bit too lame? Another presbyter of God's tribe said, Murong Xiong, what do you want? Murong Xiong said, I don't want to do anything. I'm just unhappy to see you bullying others. That presbyter of God's tribe said, this is a matter between the God's tribe and himself. If you want to interfere, sure, then the God's tribe will declare war on the God's design attic. There's no need to compete in artifact forging anymore. What did a full-scale war mean? This meant that the God's design attic was God's tribe's mortal enemy. They would do anything to get rid of him. Murong Xiong's expression did not change. The elder looked at Grand Court and said, Grand Court, do you want to do this? Murong Xiong sneered. To start an all-out war against someone, do you think I would be afraid of your God's tribe? As soon as he finished, the 18 descendant of God's tribe holding realm extermination spears moved slightly and directly pointed their spears at him, ready to fire the power of realm of destruction at any time. In other words, if they moved even the slightest bit, the secret world would be completely destroyed. See, there's another chapter to be delivered at night or tomorrow. God's tribe always wanted to deal with Xiaoyao City. God's tribe always wanted to deal with Xiaoyao City. Xiaoyao City was also known as the Rebel Army. God's tribe's #1 target to be extinguished. Once Grand Court nodded his head and interfered with the matters of the God's design attic, it would also mean that the God's design attic would have to take on the notoriety of being a rebel and be crushed by his full strength. There was no need to think about the consequences. Just like the other sects that were going against the God's tribe, their entire clan of 9 was annihilated. Presbyter of God's tribe stared coldly at the dying Grand Court. The surrounding presbyter of God's tribe, as well as the powerhouse S of the various hegemon-level sects, were all looking at Grand Court, waiting for a single word from him. They were prepared to come here. Refining was not something that could be compared to, and when God's tribe gave the order, they would immediately charge into the fray and kill all the people in God's design attic. Facing the God's tribe, facing those overlord sect powerhouse S, and looking back at the present God's design attic, the Grand Court's heart was very complicated. He didn't know how to choose. His life was already hanging by a thread on the verge of death. In the entire God's design attic, there was already no one who could fight against God's tribe. Even if they forced presbyter of God's tribe to fight, there were still those 2 motionless ancient strong. The God's design attic would definitely lose the refining competition. Losing meant that he had to listen to the orders of the God's tribe. Whether he died or lived, everything would be decided by the God's tribe. If I stand together with Xiaoyao City, I might be able to survive, but what about tomorrow? What about the day after tomorrow? The same as hiding in a tortoise nest in a secret world? This was not what God's design attic wanted. Moreover, it was hard to say whether or not he would be able to live till tomorrow if he were to fall out with the God's tribe. Out of the 18 realm exterminating spears, as long as he could release his power, the secret world would definitely be destroyed. Until now, the universal realm still did not have the power to destroy the realm of destruction. The duel continued, and they lost. However, it was possible for him to save the God's design attic. This possibility was not high, but it was still a possibility. To fall out with the God's tribe? Surviving was extremely difficult. The chances of that happening were even slimmer. The God's design attic was only a place for refining artifacts. Grand Court's gaze relaxed slightly. Seeing him loosen his eyes, Murong Xiong already knew what choice he had. Grand Court found it difficult to speak, and he said slowly, City Lord Mu, thank you for your good intentions. This is God's design attic's private matter. Let us God's design attic settle it ourselves. Murong Xiong smiled faintly and took a step back. He said unwillingly, Grand Court, it's just an annihilation spear. I'm confident that I can send all of them into a foreign space before they release the power of the annihilation spear. I can protect your God's design attic. It was not a sound transmission, but a voice transmission in front of the presbyter of God's tribe. Presbyter of God's tribe was secretly shocked. If they did not have the extermination spear, they would not be Murong Xiong's match at all, unless the powerhouse S from Ancient World could take action. However, They had been standing there motionlessly like two Buddha statues, as if they had come here to play. Inside, he was also beating his drum. The presbyter of God's tribe spoke in a deep voice. Grand Court, you must think this through. Even if you do not have the realm of destruction spear, as long as your God's design addict can become enemies with my God's tribe and avoid today, will you be able to escape tomorrow? Murong Xiong looked up with a fierce glint in his eyes and said, You think I'm afraid of God's tribe? His voice was filled with a domineering aura. The presbyter of God's tribe's forehead was quickly covered in sweat, and his body was trembling uncontrollably. The Grand Court said, Many thanks for City Lord Mu's good intentions. This is a matter of the God's design attic. Let my God's design attic settle it. He had no choice. He was the Grand Court of the God's design attic. Whatever he decided to do would have to be considered for the God's design attic, for the 100 refiners and disciples of the God's design attic. If the God's design attic was gone, then the universal realm's level of refining would fall by 100 years. Giving yourself to the God's tribe, perhaps it would allow the God's design attic to continue living. Presbyter of God's tribe said with a heavy voice. Murong Xiong, did you hear it? Murong Xiong laughed bitterly as he turned around to look at the Grand Court and said, No one from your God's design attic can compete with me anymore. You won't be able to win. If we lose, the God's tribe will still kill all of your people. Finished. Murong Xiong's silhouette moved, entering the space. A voice came out. God's tribe, if you guys dare to play any more tricks, see how lousy forces you into the crack amongst the air stewardesses. Humph! Boom! As his voice faded, the space around him trembled. Just now, that elder's body had loosened up and he was so scared that he almost fell to his knees. His face was incomparably pale, and he didn't even dare to breathe. The feeling of having half of his body in another space was just too unbearable. Presbyter of God's tribe's gaze turned sinister. He secretly clenched his fists. Murong Xiong. A cold light flashed in his eyes. He felt extremely displeased. However, this time, they were not here to deal with Murong Xiong, but the God's design attic. Seeing that Murong Xiong had disappeared, the presbyter of God's tribe said in a low voice, Grand Court, let the competition continue. You won just now. Let's continue. While they were talking, another presbyter of God's tribe walked up. A new refining platform appeared and said to the crumbling Grand Court, Grand Court, please. Grand Court's entire body was cracking. Right now, not to mention artifact forging, it was extremely difficult for him to even move a single finger. But even so, he did not give up. He was still thinking about picking up the hammer. However, clang! The hammer fell to the ground. Grand Court bent down to pick it up. Puff! A huge mouthful of blood seemed to pour out from his mouth. Grand Court, senior brother. The people of God's design attic stepped forward. The God's tribe refiner's face carried a cold smile, and he said, You can't even afford to use a hammer. What kind of weapon is this? What piece of trash? The disciples of the God's design attic all stared at him fiercely. The artificer from the God's tribe laughed. What? Am I wrong? Isn't your Grand Court a trash? Trash who can't even bring out a hammer. A God's design attic disciple could not bear listening to him anymore, and said, Grand Court is severely injured. If he was not severely injured, he could have defeated you with a single hand. The artificer from the God's tribe laughed. Who told him to be so heavily injured? Don't tell me that if you were to duel with me now, you would be considered trash even if you can't win. Grand Court, whose side is it that I am on? Ha ha ha. Suddenly, boom, the artifact forging flames on his body began to burn. The trash of the God's design attic. Look at this old man. This old man will let you know what artifact forging is. Presbyter of God's tribe moved both his hands, lightning crackling in all directions. Hammer after hammer was hammered down. Bang, bang, bang. Bang, bang, bang. It was abnormally fierce. In 5 minutes, a holy artifact was created. The aura of the God's tribe's artificer receded. Looking at the Grand Court on the other side, his face was filled with ridicule as he said, Grand Court, aren't you too weak? I'm done refining, what about you? Still not moving? Ha ha! Truly a piece of trash. Grand Court's gaze tensed up, blood gushing out from the corner of his mouth. The number of blood points on his head became 0. His body had long since exceeded the limits of what he could bear. His body had long since exceeded the limits of what he could bear. Exclusive of 1,000 people. He had used up both his profound chi and his spiritual power. It was all thanks to the power he had released from burning his life force. Even so, he still continued to crush her. However, he had suffered heavy injuries twice. Previously, his body had already severely exceeded the limit when he was fighting against the God's tribe's artificers. Even the great firmament golden immortal would not be able to save him. He knew it himself. All his life, he had been refining. All his life, he had been fighting for the artifact forging for the God's design attic. In the end, Grand Court stared angrily at the distance, his body slowly falling down. Grand Court, senior brother, master. As everyone rushed forward, the cracks on Grand Court's body slowly expanded until it was like porcelain breaking into pieces. Blood flowed all over the ground. The state of death was incomparably miserable, but his eyes were staring hard into the distance. He died with grievance. Master, woo-woo. Many disciples began to cry bitterly. Grand Court is dead. The artificer on the refining platform loudly laughed. Ha ha, it's fine if you don't win, but why did you refine yourself to death? Trash is truly trash. Weak trash. Ha ha, ha ha. The people of God's design attic were crying, while the people of God's tribe were laughing maniacally. God's design attic is only SOSO. I thought he was that strong. That's right. When the presbyter of God's tribe made his move, he immediately refined himself to death. The strongest refiner in the world is in the God's tribe. This is the result of going against the God's tribe. Serves him right. Presbyter of God's tribe is mighty. Presbyter of God's tribe is domineering. Ha ha! Many people began to wildly laugh and discuss. Actually, in their hearts, they knew that if Grand Court was not injured, none of the refiners in God's tribe would be his match. What this world focused on was not refining strength, but the strength of one's fist. In the end, the God's design attic was still a place for refining. Refining could not grasp the laws. He couldn't control his own fate. This was reality. This was heaven, the God's tribe's heaven. If you were to go against the heavens, would you have a good ending? The cheers of 10,000 people immediately covered up the crying sounds of the God's design attic. The people of God's design attic all had red eyes and gnashed their teeth as they watched the crazy people laughing. They really wanted to pounce and bite them. What are you looking at? Do you still have a temper? Do you think that you waste martial arts training will make a move? If you have the ability, continue competing. Aren't your God's design attic powerful? Is this the universal realm's refiner of the ox? Let's continue. Ha ha! If he threw himself forward, he would only be sending himself to his death. A few pavilion masters tried their best to control the situation and said heavily, God's design attic has not lost. We haven't lost yet. There were still 8 pavilion masters who had yet to fight. He was also the last person from the God's design attic who did not take part in the battle. Presbyter of God's tribe gave a cold laugh. He pressed his hands together, and the entire audience quieted down and said, However, you guys are about to lose. Continue. Your Grand Court has already been refined to death by me, you useless trash. Hee hee, this old man will step on you one by one. Ha ha! Boom! While they were talking, the refining fire on the blacksmith body burned up once again. Staring at one of the pavilion masters, he said, Trash, come. As one of the pavilion masters stepped onto the refining platform, the refining fire on his body instantly ignited as well. At this moment, bam! The God's tribe's refining technique smashed down heavily with a hammer. The refining force moved. It shot out directly. The artificer from God's design attic was directly sent flying. Bang! He landed heavily on the ground, spitting out a mouthful of blood. With a flip of his eyes, his body slowly stiffened. God's tribe wins. Next, the God tribe refiner laughed out loud. Ha ha! He's so weak. and yet he dares to come out and make a fool of himself? The trash of God's design attic. All of you go together. This old man will take care of all of you at once. Don't waste my time. Haha. Extreme arrogance. The remaining 7 artificers from God's design attic looked at each other. Their anger was suppressed. We God's design attic will never win with numbers. I'll do it. A younger pavilion master walked forward, picked up his hammer, and made an inviting gesture. Come. Umph. The artificer from the God's tribe sneered and said, Trash, you dare to sneer and mock the God's tribe? Die. Boom. The hammers moved. Refining force burst out. The artificers of the God's design attic also moved, hammering down with heavy force. When the 2 refining force came into contact with each other, it was obvious that his strength was insufficient. Rumble. His body instantly exploded backwards. He didn't even have time to stabilize his body. The God's tribe's artificer hammered down again. Boom. The refining force pierced right through his body, causing the God's design attic's pavilion master to split into 2, his body dropping to the ground, fresh blood flowing everywhere. The faces of everyone from the God's design attic turned pale. 3 pavilion masters had died in a row. The artificer from the God's tribe sneered and said, Not even worth a single blow. Useless. The artificers in the God's tribe were already very strong, and in the entire God's design attic, no one other than the Grand Court and the 2nd Pavilion Master were a match for him. God's tribe wins next. God's tribe wins next. God's tribe wins next. One by one, they walked forward and lost. If it wasn't serious injuries, then it was a coma. The God tribe refiner was ruthlessly slapping God's design attic in the face. Every time he won a match, he would laugh at God's design attic loudly. This is God's design attic? The trash pavilion. Isn't it too trash? To the point of ridiculing the God's design attic for being worthless. A loss was a loss. The losers were powerless to refute. The God's design attic could only be ruthlessly crushed by the God's tribe refiners. They wanted to resist, but his skills were inferior. So, no matter what he said, it was useless. God tribe wins next. The 8 pavilion masters all lost. Now, there was no one left in God's design attic. The artificer from the God's tribe looked at God's design attic and laughed. Next, continue. All the elders of the God's design attic lowered their heads. Isn't God's design attic the one who is responsible for refining artifacts? With only this level, isn't it too lacking? Sigh, I thought you guys were so strong. So boring. The artificers of the God's tribe were exceptionally proud. The faces of the elders of God's tribe were also flushed red, their smiles full of contempt. Who else? The trash of the God's design attic. Who else can fight against me? Not a single person from the God's design attic stood forward. With a light smile, he said, A bunch of trash. Since you guys can't beat me in a row, then I don't think there's a need for your God's design attic to exist anymore. At this moment, Long Fei turned around to look at her white brows and said indifferently, Grand Disciple, it's your turn to go up on stage. When they heard the presbyter of God's tribe say there is no need for God's design attic to exist, the numerous elders and disciples of the God's design attic trembled. When they heard the presbyter of God's tribe say there is no need for God's design attic to exist, the numerous elders and disciples of the God's design attic trembled. In the dark, Elder Swordsman said indifferently, It's starting. God's tribe is starting to clean this place. Just like the fairy sword sect back then. His eyes were filled with fury as the scene of the fairy sword sect's death played out in front of his eyes. It was the same back then. The match was a crushing defeat. He wanted to obtain the ancient sword's spiritual power's inheritance power, but he was rejected. But in a match, he still lost and defeated Fairy Sword Sect. After 3 days and 3 nights of brutal slaughter, every disciple had a family of 9, not even babies in their infancy. The 100,000 blood streams from the Fairy Sword Sect flowed like rivers. The entire Immortal Sword Mountain was dyed red, and the ghosts of the wronged wailed in grief. They cried for 7 whole days and 7 nights, a scene that Elder Swordsman would never want to experience again in his entire life. Every time the night rang, his body would tremble uncontrollably. Now, history is going to repeat itself. The gods' tribes were about to start cleaning up. None of them would be spared. Actually, when Elder Swordsman saw Murong Xiong appearing, he was thinking of how he and Murong Xiong should ally. But Grand Court thought that if he lost, God's tribe could let him off this once. But he was wrong. The word mercy had never existed in the God's tribe's methods before. The God's tribe's usual method was to cut the grass at the root. Senior Mia also frowned. Do you want to move? God's design attic was already like this. Grand Court was dead. Second Pavilion Master was severely injured, and a few of the Grand Courtess were either dead or injured. So what if he could be saved? Besides, saving them would cost their lives. They came here to wait for Long Fei. If Long Fei did not appear, would they really bet their lives on it? This time, Elder Swordsman said without hesitation, "Move." Xiao Bai's eyes lit up. Binghu was already eager to give a try. The others were also excited. 1 year of hiding, 1 year of hibernation, the same year of bitter cultivation. All of their efforts were for this very day. Their eyes were all filled with excitement. Now, they were waiting for God's tribe to take action. Damn it, I can't wait any longer. Li Yuanba's brows tightened slightly. For the first time, his foolish expression revealed a hint of anger, and with a light sound, he said, "Move one and try it." Qingyi snuggled up to him. Similarly, Qingyi's body was emanating a battle intent as well. She also found the God's tribe's actions pleasing to the eye. She also went into battle preparation. Li Yuanba said solemnly, "This is the place that boss and I agreed to meet. I won't allow anyone to destroy this place." God tribe, in another place, a figure dressed in tight robes stood proudly in one place like a sword. Watching everything that was happening on the plaza, her eyes trembled slightly. God's tribe. The sword intent on Oya's body moved slightly. The myriad world's sword chime. In the darkness, a pair of evil spirits-like eyes slowly opened. The corners of his mouth curled up as he smiled sinisterly in excitement. It looked like an evil spirit child, causing one's hair to stand on end. He was a heavenly spirit. One of the 3 great heaven pillar walked out of the ancient world's Bedlam lands. Dressed in an evil spirit black robe, with 2 huge eyes, he gave a sinister and eerie laugh and said indifferently, "Finally, it's my turn to go on stage." God tried. Murong Xiong also replied indifferently, "Although you don't want to form an alliance with me, this road is the agreed place between my nephew and the King Kong. Then it can't go missing." Annihilation Spear? TCH. Murong Xiong's finger moved slightly, and the air around him fluctuated slightly. Several disciples of the Mu clan moved. Murong Xiong sneered and said, "Since your extermination realm spear can fire 1 shot, consider it my loss." Everything was ready. This was, after all, the God's design attic, so if the God's tribe didn't make a move, the people in the dark wouldn't either. Thus, they were all waiting for the God's tribe. As long as the God's tribe made a move, it would be an earth-shattering explosion. In the plaza, the presbyter of God's tribe were still jeering at them. The trash of the God's design attic. A bunch of trash. You waste people are the only ones refining. Go refine your grandmother's ass. Trash is trash. In front of my God's tribe, I can only tremble, Endless ridicule and all sorts of insults. He had a complacent expression and was incomparably arrogant. The kind of lofty, superior aura was vividly displayed. No one can oppose the God's tribe. We gave you the opportunity to choose before God's design attic. Since you choose to die, then we can only send you to hell. One last question. If no one can win against me, then go to hell with your God's design attic. Who else? With a loud crash, his voice overwhelmed the entire audience. On the God's design attic side, not a single sound could be heard. No one was a match for the artificers of the God's tribe. They were like a lamb waiting to be slaughtered. There was nothing to be done. The God's tribe refiner smiled proudly. Since you don't have it, then you. At this moment, God's design attic's door suddenly opened with a clang, and he roared, "In this daddy!" Boom! His voice was deafening. Everyone turned to look at that direction. Second Pavilion Master. Master. It's the second Pavilion Master. The person who came out of God's Design Attic was Abbot Whitebrow, who had been training in God's Design Attic for 2 days and 2 nights. Seeing Bai Mei walk out of the God's Design Attic, the people from the God tribe were also stunned. Wasn't he seriously injured? Why does it look like nothing happened? Is it done? Impossible. That power can at least keep him from getting out of bed for half a year. God's Design Attic is a refining place. They don't know a thing about pills. It's impossible for any good pills to save him. Everyone began to discuss. However, although he was shocked, Presbyter of God tribe was not worried. At the start, they only wanted to suppress the aura of the God's Design Attic to let them know who was the sky above the universal realm. A mere white eyebrow? He could turn the sky upside down. Of course not. Seeing Whitebrow walk over, the God's tribe's refiner sneered and said, "Oh, there's still a piece of trash here? It just so happens that this old man has not had enough practice and is waiting to die." Abbot Whitebrow walked towards refining platform. An elder said, "Second Pavilion Master, Grand Court." Abbot Whitebrow said with a heavy voice, I know what happened just now. Rest well over there. Leave the rest to me." Second Pavilion Master, this God's tribe refiner is not simple. His refining techniques is very profound. Yes, especially the refining force. You have to be careful. The clan elders of the God's Design Attic started to worry. Although White-Browed Sword's refining techniques was a bit stronger than theirs, they were still uncertain in their hearts when it came to dealing with God's tribe's refiners. And not only that, they were also unsure if he was a God's tribe refiner. Abbot Whitebrow didn't say anything further. He couldn't wait any longer. Let's start. Whitebrow's appearance suddenly occurred. It startled God's tribe. The elder swordsmen and the others who were hiding in the dark were also stunned. They were about to make a move, but they didn't expect Whitebrow to step out and continue forging. However, they did not have any hope for Whitebrow either. Even if they did not understand, they knew that this God's tribe's refiner was not simple. What's the point of competing with a hammer? Just do it, Tandapeo shouted in anger. Shall we directly attack first? I really can't take it anymore. He couldn't wait. Elder Swordsman slightly said, Let's take a look first. This person is a little strange. The injuries on his body will be completely healed in 2 days. Fu Shishan said, God's Design Attic should not have such good pills. Their pills are usually low-level healing pills, and they do not have any special pills, so they would not normally use them. A few times I suggested that they buy some high-level pills, but they were rejected by Grand Court. Su tilted his head and asked, Could it be that Big Brother Long Fei gave me this pellet? Everyone shivered. However, it was only a slight pause. If Long Fei was here, he would have appeared a long time ago. Senior Mie said, Don't worry, just take a look first. The sky's spirit grumbled in annoyance. Damn, I was about to go on stage, but you suddenly rushed out. What do you mean by not letting me go on stage? He couldn't wait. When Great Vajra Li Yuanba appeared, he killed all of the God's tribe as present there. The 2 commanders were all dead. They were truly powerful. He wanted to be like that too. Ever since he had left the ancient world to enter the universal realm, he had been searching for such an opportunity, but he couldn't find it. Now that the opportunity had finally come, he couldn't help but want to explode. But Whitebrowed appeared and disrupted his plans to go on stage. Let's see what you can refine. Damn it, on refining platform. The artificer from the God's tribe looked at Whitebrow and sneered. You should be the last artificer from the God's Design Attic, right? Don't say that I didn't give you a chance. If you kneel down and kowtow to me and acknowledge me as your teacher, I will let you live. The words in White-browed Immortal's heart were, I worship your ancestors for 8 generations. However, he held back his words and lightly said, Stop with the nonsense. Let's begin. The eyes of the refiner of the God's tribe turned sinister. You're looking to die, right? Then I'll send you to hell. Boom! The hammer moved. A stream of refining force flowed out. At the same time, the refining fire on his body also started to burn. With the fusion of the 2 powers, In an instant, the refining force rose to its peak. However, at this moment, Abbot Whitebrow didn't do anything. He did not take out the hammer, nor did he release the refining fire. He just stood there quietly. What is he doing? Damn, could he be scared silly by Presbyter of God's tribe? Ha ha! You can see that he's a tease. Later on, he will be crushed by the Presbyter of God's tribe's refining force, and he will kneel on the ground, kowtowing and begging for forgiveness. Many weapons craftsmen from the sects mocked. The elders on the side of the God's Design attic were also incomparably anxious. Second Pavilion Master, make your move. If you don't, then it's too late. His refining force will kill you. Master, Senior Brother. The people from the God's Design attic looked at the motionless white brows in front of the refining platform, and their hearts were about to go crazy with anxiety. This was the last battle of God's Design attic. If he lost again, the God's Design attic would have no hope. Ha! Useless! Have you been scared silly by my refining force? And what's even more shocking to you? Boom! The God's Tribe refiner's hammer moved and smashed down heavily. The power of the God's Tribe gushed out. The injured Pavilion Masters of the God's Design attic immediately cried out, Second Pavilion Master, be careful. He's here. The powerful attacking refining force directly rushed at White Broadsword, as if it was a huge wave that was dozens of feet tall, was surging towards him. With this power, not even an overlord-level body would be able to withstand it. But even so, Abbot Whitebrow was motionless. Moreover, what made him even more confused was that he directly closed his eyes. Accept your fate? Ha ha ha! He's going to die. You finally resigned yourself to your fate. Just now, you clamored so arrogantly. I thought you were that strong. So you're just scum here to die. Ha ha! What dogs hit Second Pavilion Master? In my opinion, he's the biggest trash of the God's Design attic. Ha! The jeers rose and fell. Abbot Whitebrow's actions were far too abnormal. This was not a normal artifact forging at all. He was courting death. The God's Tribe refiner also laughed complacently. You overestimate yourself. Even a trash like you dares to fight against me? Prepare for death. Ha ha ha. Presbyter of God's Tribe was also feeling proud. Everyone thought he was going to die when they saw his white brows not moving at all. At the window, the corner of Long Fei's mouth slightly curled and lightly smiled, and said, To think that you're actually an expert at posturing. Rumble, rumble, rumble. A huge wave of refining power came smashing down, and at this moment, Whitebrow's eyes twitched, and a ball of flame appeared in his eyes. Immediately after, the refining materials on refining platform floated up. Boom! The flames burned. His mouth silently recited the ancient alchemy chant, that kind of heaven and earth. Naturally, the power of the Tao technique began to flow. Boom! In an instant, the several meters tall refining force was extinguished and instantly disappeared without a trace. Boom! The white-browed idea moved and smashed down from the sky. In the time it took for lightning to flash, an extremely strong refining force was released from its body. It was like the roar of an azure dragon. He channeled his power. Rumble! The God's Tribe refiner was instantly crushed to the point of kneeling on the ground. The kneecap immediately shattered as fresh blood gushed out. The eyes of the blacksmith from the God's Tribe turned sinister. His anger overflowed into the sky, and he tried to get up, but another force came crashing down. It directly hit the top of his head. Bam! He bowed and knocked his forehead heavily on the ground. He kowtowed right in front of the dead Grand Court. A loud kowtowing sound could be heard. The many clan elders of God's Tribe stood up, their expressions secretly changing. The artificer from the God's Tribe went crazy and roared. But another force descended. Bam! He heavily kowtowed again, and his forehead was covered in blood. Veins bulged on his forehead, and his entire body trembled. "I will kill you," not waiting for him to stand up. Bam! Another kowtow. A total of 3 kowtows later, his head was splitting apart, and fresh blood continuously flowed out. It was his head that was kowtowed, and similarly, it was the head of the God's tribe. What kind of existence was the God's tribe? The masters of the universal realm, lofty existences. When had they ever kneeled and kowtowed? To kowtow 3 times in a row was a humiliation to the God's tribe, and in front of so many people. The presbyter of God's tribe was furious. Abbot Whitebrow suddenly suppressed the aura on his body. As his body descended, a glowing purple holy artifact descended from the sky. He coldly said, "Refining is complete." The entire audience was stunned. They all stared at Abbot Whitebrow in surprise. It was also at this time the 2 bodhisattvas that had not moved from the beginning to the end suddenly moved. In that instant, they appeared in front of a refining platform, and their cold voices sounded as if they were speaking from hell itself. Ancient alchemy. Ancient alchemy. Ancient alchemy. As soon as his voice fell, the entire hall fell silent. Everyone looked at the bodhisattva in unison. He did not know what kind of refining techniques Long Fei had taught him. He only knew that it was very strong, stronger than the refining techniques he had cultivated in the past. When the ancient strong set out, he thought to himself, could it be that the ancestor is an ancient almighty powerhouse? Wow, no wonder. No wonder Master said that. I really have eyes but couldn't recognize Mount Tai. It's just that, senior brother. If he had asked for help earlier, the senior brother would have been fine. In the dark. What did he just say? Ancient alchemy? Impossible, right? The elder swordsman said in a doubtful tone, the ancient alchemy is something that only the ancient world-s can grasp, and moreover, not all ancient strong can grasp it. Xiaobai muttered, Ice and fire, don't you feel that the movements in which he was forging artifacts earlier looked a little familiar? I'm also thinking about that question, but I don't know where I've seen it before. Senior Mia said, could it be that there's an ancient strong that is trying to protect God's design attic? God's design craftsman has entered the ancient world before. Could he be his friend in the ancient world? Elder Swordsman said, that's possible. Now we have something to play with. Second Pavilion Master was heavily injured and completely recovered in 2 days. Within these 2 days, the strength of the refining techniques explosively increased, and it is very likely that the ancient strong is currently in the God's design attic. Elder Swordsman stroked his beard and said, this refining competition is not over yet. Tandapeo said, I actually hope for it to end soon and start earlier. Ancient alchemy. Only the ancient world's refining techniques could master such a skill. Its appearance shocked the entire audience, especially the people from God's tribe. The few presbyter of God's tribe's expressions all changed. They walked up to the bodhisattva and said respectfully, Master, do you mean the ancient alchemy? The bodhisattva didn't pay any attention to him. He looked at Abbot Whitebrow and asked, where did you train from? Even Ancient Strong was shocked. With pride between his eyebrows, he said arrogantly, do I need to report my cultivation from any place? Presbyter of God's tribe, continue. Next, his tone was arrogant and full of dominance. Many God's design attic disciples and elders also let out heavy sighs of relief, becoming very excited. The artificer from the God's tribe who had been helped to his feet said in a deep voice, Whitebrow, I will kill you. Bai Mei smiled. Elder, do we have to fight now? Is this the way it's done in the God's tribe? Many of the presbyter of God's tribe's faces darkened. A God's tribe refiner shouted, I am here to experience your ancient alchemy. Boom! The moment his aura appeared, it burst forth. The super strong refining fire was burning. Holding the purple heavenly hammer in his hand, he hammered down. Buzz! The purple chi wave flipped and shot out. Abbot Whitebrow's body moved. He chanted a chant silently, the method seemingly very slow, but in reality, it was shockingly fast. Seeing the purple-colored refining force rushing over, Zhang Xian frowned. Break! Boom! A loud explosion resounded. A wave of power surged forward. The purple energy crushed, and the refining force released by Abbot Whitebrow directly pierced through. Boom! Plop! The god's tribe artificer knelt on the ground fiercely as the kneecap shattered. Abbot Whitebrow flicked the aura on his body. Bam! His head heavily knocked against the ground, causing the blue stone on the ground to crack from the cowdow and fresh blood to spurt out from his forehead. Bam! Bam! After 3 consecutive cowdows, Presbyter of God's tribe's forehead was cracked from the cowdow, and even his scalp was numb. Against Whitebrow's refining force, he had no chance of counterattack and could only be crushed. This was the difference in their levels. The difference in refining realm. God's design addict wins. Next, I want to take revenge on you all one by one. Senior brother, just watch. I definitely won't let God's tribe touch you. I will definitely protect this place well. Baime looked at the presbyter of God's tribe and asked, "Who else? Come on up. All of you can come at me together." His temper was explosive. He was the type of person who would gladly accept kindness and enmity. Now that he had crushed God's tribe, he would be extremely arrogant. All of a sudden, God's tribe was stomped on. Whitebrow's refining techniques was too strong. They were not his match at all. However, what kind of identity does the presbyter of God's tribe have? God's tribe, how could they admit defeat? An elder shouted loudly, "Whitebrow, you just made the people of God's tribe kneel down. You dare to humiliate God's tribe. This is disrespect to God's tribe, disrespect to Emperor Xian. I think you're tired of living." Since he couldn't win the duel, he might as well find another reason. Whitebrow sneered and said, "Today is the artifact forging ceremony. Didn't God's tribe want to test our God's design addict's refining techniques? Come on, send out your God's tribe's strongest refiner. I will use my strength to prove to you that this is the universal realm's strongest refining place." The elders of the God's design attic also walked over. "Right, if you have the guts, then try refining it. Come on, let's compete with second pavilion master. If we can't beat him, we'll just find another *T bowl." All of a sudden, his momentum rose. The presbyter of God's tribe were all abnormally angry, but they could not compare to him. They did not dare to truly use force, because there was still a Murong Xiong in the shadows. This guy is a space inheritor. Who knew how many experts he had brought with him? Once the battle started, even they would not be able to obtain any benefits. But if you were to leave just like that, then where would the face of the God's tribe go? Where is the dignity of the God's tribe? If they could not even take down a small artifact forging ground like the God's design attic, what would the great elders of the God's tribe think of them? He would just be discarded like a piece of trash. No way. A few elders' eyes tightened, and an elder from the idea said with a sound transmission, "Elders, I just released my sound soul. It won't be long before we arrive at the shrine's palace." A look of excitement appeared on their faces. An elder said, "What did you say? If we can't even solve this little problem, how will we be able to stand up in the shrine in the future?" That elder said, "Don't worry, when I say Murong Xiong is here, the Grand Elder will definitely send people over." Xiaoyao City, his mortal enemy. Murong Xiong was one of the top 3 people on the wanted list. If they could take Murong Xiong down, Emperor Xian would definitely be heavily injured. The great elders of the shrine would never let go of this opportunity. Several elders laughed excitedly. A mere God's design addict dares to be so arrogant in front of us God's tribe. Just you wait. This place will soon be in ruins. No one can save this place. Ha ha! The few of them were laughing in their hearts. Baime didn't know what they were talking about, and spoke with a deep voice. "Do any of you dare to come up and fight? If not, then please leave God's design attic." Presbyter of God's tribe was stunned. The Bodhisattva moved and stood on top of the refining platform. If they left the God's design attic, it would be difficult to enter again. If they left the God's design attic, it would be difficult to enter again. God's design attic was an ethereal secret world. It was basically impossible to enter without opening. If they leave, then even if the shrine's reinforcements come, it will be useless. Just as the presbyter of God's tribe's faces darkened, the two ancient strong S from ancient world moved slightly, and a bodhisattva stood in front of the refining platform, slightly extending a hand. Black hands. It was as hard as steel. But his hand was filled with a black, baleful aura, like 10,000 tiny black snakes slowly moving on his arm. It was extremely terrifying. The presbyter of God's tribe looked surprised and said, "We still have an ancient strong." "That's right. I forgot about the two lords." Ha. They knew very well in their hearts why the two ancient strong S had come to the God's design attic. They came to practice, come to cripple the God's design attic. However, the presbyter of God's tribe cautiously asked, "Master, do you want to compete with him in artifact forging?" They did not know the situation of these two bodhisattvas. They did not know whether they knew how to forge artifacts or not. If they could not even hold a hammer on the stage, then it would be embarrassing. The bodhisattva nodded his head, looked at Whitebrow, and said faintly, "Let me see how far your ancient alchemy has been cultivated, and also let you experience the true ancient alchemy." As soon as he finished, inside the God's design attic, Long Fei trembled slightly. "A real ancient alchemy? What do you mean? Could it be that the ancient alchemy that I used to cultivate in the past is not authentic?" TCH. Long Fei expressed contempt in his heart. He had the inheritance of the ancient power on him. How could the ancient alchemy he cultivated and be fake? However, Long Fei looked at the black, baleful chi on his hand, and his heart tightened. A black-colored refining fire that was basically not released at all, and the refining fire is already wrapped in his body. This ability. Very strong. The aura on his body was extremely strong. It felt as if there was an endless amount of power within it. Abbot Whitebrow made a gesture of invitation, saying, "Let's see who's the true owner of the ancient alchemy." As soon as he finished speaking, the refining competition had begun. The bodhisattva waved his hand. Boom! The black flames moved. The surrounding presbyter of God's tribes were shocked and immediately rolled out. Their mouths were covered in mud, and they looked extremely miserable, but they did not dare to complain at all. He even started praising her. What a powerful refining force. Amazing, it's going to be amazing. The Lord is mighty. The black aura moved and wrapped around a piece of deep-sea mysterious iron. In the air, a black flame burned crazily. The power of the heaven and earth, and naturally, the Tao technique started to move. However, the power of the Tao technique was naturally different from the world of the ancient alchemy that Long Fei cultivated in. The power he released was incomparably tyrannical. Furthermore, it carried a sense of viciousness, evil, ruthlessness, and an endless amount of killing intent. Darkness attribute ancient alchemy? Similarly, on the other side, Abbot Whitebrow did the same thing. However, the power he released was as weak as an ant compared to his opponents. Bai Mei's eyebrows tightened. Her heart was not in a mess. She cultivated according to the secret technique Long Fei taught her, step by step. Humph! The bodhisattva coldly looked at Whitebrow's actions and said with a cold sneer, "Ancient alchemy like yours is simply a blasphemy to the ancient power." Scram! As soon as his words fell, he flipped his hand. Rumble! The black infernal energy rushed out like a wild beast. Abbot Whitebrow raised his eyes. His reaction wasn't slow either. The refining force released from his body surged forth to block the attack. The two forces collided, and then Abbot Whitebrow's eyes narrowed. It was as if his power had been neglected and did not have the slightest effect on the black power. Not only that, his mind suddenly started to become chaotic. All sorts of evil powers surged into his mind. Boom! Bai Qi closed his eyes, resisting evil thoughts, but a black infernal energy rushed out, as if the heavens were suddenly pressing down on them. Bam! His entire body was crushed down from the air. It crashed to the ground. The semi-finished product he refined also turned into powder in an instant. He spat out a mouthful of blood, and his face turned pale. The people of God's design attic moved forward together. Can this kind of place be called a refining location? How laughable. The Bodhisattva coldly said. He raised his right hand, and the black infernal energy gathered once again, covering half of the refining plaza. His eyebrows moved. Rumble, rumble, rumble. It was as if a layer of black sky had crashed down, and all the people in God's design attic were squashed until they kneeled on the ground. The ground had caved in, and fresh blood gushed out of their bodies. He was able to crush everyone in God's design attic with one hand. It was terrifyingly powerful. The people of God's tribe were stunned. Those sect powerhouses all looked as if they had seen a god. Their eyes were filled with worship, and they were on the verge of kneeling down and kowtowing. Ha! Presbyter of God's tribe laughed out loud. Abbot Whitebrow, you are crazy. How arrogant. You think you can compete with the ancient strong with just this little bit of refining techniques? Ha ha! The clan elders of the God's tribe were all excited. The ancient strong's refining force had far exceeded their expectations. He could crush the entire God's design attic with a single hand. He was too strong. If they had known this would happen, they wouldn't have needed to fight in a war of attrition. An ancient strong would have been enough. Whitebrow was crushed to the point of incomparable pain. It was the same for the elders of the God's design attic and their disciples. Do you want to make a move? God's design attic is finished. Make your move. I'm going to lose control of my power. Li Yuanba stared at the ancient strong and frowned. Ancient devil. Do you know it? Qing Yi asked. Li Yuanba said, I know the black fiend Qi on his body. They should be the earliest creatures in the ancient world, and also the first batch of creatures bred in the ancient world. The reason they are called organisms and not monsters is also because they are not humans and not demons. It is because they have not successfully evolved. Qing Yi didn't understand. Li Yuanba continued. Emperor Xian actually let them out. What is he trying to do? Isn't he afraid that the ancient world will experience chaos again? What good will it do him? Qing Yi said. In the past 100 years, he rarely goes into seclusion in universal realm, and no one in God's tribe knows what he wants to do. In this past year, he had constantly arranged for Powerhouse S from the ancient world S to enter the universal realm. Why would these evil people all listen to his orders? Li Yuanba said, Emperor Xian must be doing something. Qing Yi said, Do you want to make a move? The people of God's design attic will not be able to hold on any longer. Li Yuanba looked again and was about to make his move. The God's design attic's door was pushed open once again. Clang! A loud sound was heard. All the black infernal energy suddenly vanished. Clang! Clang! The door swung open from the inside with a soft sound. The sound wasn't loud, but it was as if a thunderclap had erupted in that instant, causing it to shake violently. Not only that, the pressure that was pressing down on the elders of the God's design attic and the black fiendish aura that the disciples were emitting had all disappeared. In an instant, it was all gone. He was crushed by an even more powerful force. The crowd was startled and immediately quieted down. Everyone looked at the young man at the entrance. It stopped for a moment. A presbyter of God's tribe coldly asked in disdain, A waste of warrior realm? God's design attic has such a trash? Abbot Whitebrow stood up with difficulty and said with excitement, Martial ancestor. The entire audience was silent again, looking at Bai Mei in shock, then looked at Long Fei. Pucci, ha ha, ha ha. Presbyter of God's tribe laughed crazily. Those weapons craftsmen from the other sects also started to laugh loudly. Ha ha ha. Is Abbot Whitebrow an idiot? It must be just my brain. He's actually calling me a little grandmaster, and one even more so, a waste of the warrior realm. Ha ha ha. I'm dying of laughter. Whitebrow, you can call me Grand Ancestor Master now, huh? Many people mocked him. Presbyter of God's tribe said, God's design attic was single-handedly created by you all. He is your master. I never thought that he would even have a master. Ha ha. But his master is actually a trash of the warrior realm. Oh my God, I'm going to die from laughter. I always thought that your God's design attic was not bad. Ha ha. I'm dying of laughter. There was nothing to mock about Long Fei's appearance. However, as the ancestor master of Abbot Whitebrow, He was different. Moreover, even the elders and disciples of the God's design attic were stunned. Many of them reminded him in a low voice, "Second Pavilion Master, where did the ancestor come from? Our master doesn't even have a master. How could we have a grandmaster?" "Master, did you get it wrong? Who is this kid?" Everyone was talking about it. On the plaza, both the God's tribe and the sex artificers were laughing at him. But the eyes of the two ancient strong-s turned sinister. Their gaze were sharp as knives. Looking at Long Fei, the two of them did not move their gazes away from him and only stared at him. His expression darkened. In the dark, but it was boiling. "It's the boss. It's Big Brother Long Fei. Ha ha, brat, you finally appeared. I thought you wouldn't come." "Boss." Both of Li Yuanba's eyes were filled with tears as he clenched his fists tightly. The space around him had been torn apart, and the thick and pure energy seemed to be able to shatter space itself. Qingyi also looked at Long Fei, then looked at Li Yuanba. She was a little jealous and muttered, "You will always be number one in the heart of Lubi." It was as if he was jealous. An old man whispered into Murong Xiong's ears, "City Lord, he is the young lord." Murong Xiong had never seen Long Fei before. He only knew that his nephew was called Long Fei. Hearing the words of the old man beside him, his eyes suddenly sank. "My nephew? My sister's son?" Old eyes tear-filled. Murong Xiong's expression was incomparably excited and was about to rush out. However, he was pulled back by two old men and said, "City Lord, there's no rush. If you go out like this, you will only reveal his identity. You must know that he is God's tribe's most wanted criminal. Also, his cultivation. Why is it warrior realm? When the western regions was collapsing, his cultivation should have been at overlord realm. But how did he become a warrior realm after disappearing for a year?" Murong Xiong grinned. "You know my ass, he's my nephew, my nephew. I can't even see through him." "How can you see through him?" "Ha!" The elders smiled awkwardly. Yes, the Lord is right. The young lord was born of the young lady. How could we see through him?" The three Mu clan siblings. Be it in terms of talent, potential, or physical aptitude, Mu Wanner was the strongest. She was the strongest in Mu clan for the past 10 million years. Furthermore, the fusion between him and the number one genius of the Long family, Long Zhanting, and the fusion of some kind of power, how could ordinary people see through such a strong power? However, even though he said that, Murong Xiong was still very worried in his heart. Moreover, that was his nephew. Right now, he did not even know where his sister was. His second brother Murong Qi had also disappeared, and he was not married either. If something were to happen to him, even Murong Xiong himself would not forgive himself. And then, Murong Xiong said, "The two of you go to his side. Whoever dares to touch him, immediately kill them." The two old men moved slightly as they traveled through the void. A slight ripple appeared in the space beside Long Fei. Two old men were in position. Murong Xiong laughed excitedly. "My nephew, you finally appeared." In the plaza, the ancient strong in front of the refining platform retracted his gaze and turned over with one hand. Boom! The Black Fury skill condensed once again. It was a black mass, and this time it covered half of the God's design attic. It was like thick layers of clouds that were constantly rolling down, and a powerful force continuously came crushing down. Boom! 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 Long Fei raised both his eyes and said indifferently, "Is this the power of your so-called true ancient alchemy?" Finished. He raised his foot and lightly descended. Buzz! A beam of light shot out from the ground. Instantly, the black infernal energy in the sky vanished. This step was like an earth-shattering one. The expressions of those people who were mocking Long Fei a moment ago were warped and ugly, as if they had just been slapped in the mouth. All of their eyes were staring at Long Fei. Ancient Strong's aura shook. Boom! This time, both hands moved at the same time. The black devilish chi wrapped around his body rushed towards Long Fei like two flood dragoness. It continued to emit vicious roars. Roar! Roar! The scene was extremely shocking. There were many people secretly worrying about Long Fei. Boss, be careful. I have to get out. I can't let Big Brother Long Fei disappear once again. They had to lose control. However, it was still stopped by Elder Swordsman and the rest. Facing the two gigantic flood dragoness, Long Fei acted like he didn't see them and walked towards refining platform, step by step. With a heavy cry, Abbot Whitebrow said, "Martial Ancestor, be careful." Long Fei smiled slightly. The flood dragon rammed into him. The flood dragon's head instantly shattered when it was still half a meter away from him. The flood dragon's body continued to strike. However, it was as if there was an air shield on Long Fei's body, blocking all of the energy outside. It could not hurt a single hair on his body. This was not the case. If the ancient strong wasn't released by the refining force, Long Fei would have already been blasted flying. But the power released by the ancient strong was the refining force. If that was the case, his artifact spirit, refining techniques, could completely crush others. Even if the ancient artifact forging king appeared, it would be useless, let alone his strength in the ancient alchemy. Their realms were on a completely different level. Long Fei walked to refining platform step by step. Looking at the ancient strong, he smiled lightly and said, "Is it fun?" Too strong. Far. Too strong. Far the refining techniques that the ancient powerhouse had displayed was too overbearing. This was not an ordinary artifact forging technique. Following the bombardment of his powers, the sky above the god's design attic was filled with black chi waves, which were like clouds, with the plaza as the center and layer upon layer covering it, as if this was not artifact forging. He wasn't the one refining. The heavens were refining. He was just releasing the power of the heavens. The heaven and earth. Naturally, the Tao technique, this was the essence of the ancient alchemy. To be able to cultivate to such a level, it could no longer be described as strong. Abbreviation, he was the peak master refiner of the ancient world. Long Fei looked in their eyes and was secretly shocked in his heart. The highest level of profoundness of the ancient alchemy. I have never stepped into this realm. If we did not meet Horcrux's family, I'm afraid, dragonfly calmly, waiting for ancient strong to end. Day the Elder grew excited. When the true power of the ancient strong was displayed, there was only admiration in their hearts. They were too strong, so strong that no one could defeat them. Baitu, presbyter of God's tribe, all became pleased with themselves. You must be scared silly, right? This is the true, refining power of the God's tribe. What God's design attic? What God's design craftsmen are you talking about? They're all trash. Kid, do you know what it means to forge artifacts? Are you able to handle hammers? Haha, he must be scared to the point of peeing. Each a taunting sound rang out. Dragon Fei ignored them and stood there quietly. The people from the God's design attic were also getting anxious. Is he still going to lose? The refining techniques that he has displayed is too powerful. I'm afraid even Master would not be able to win against him. What should we do? Even though he had passed on the ancient alchemy of the second senior brother, his ancient alchemy simply cannot compare to that ancient strong's. Far the refining techniques displayed by the ancient powerhouse was an invincible existence. It was simply impossible for them to win. The majority of the people in the plaza all knew about smithing. They all knew that Long Fei couldn't win, because the refining force displayed by the ancient strong was just like a 360-degree angle without a dead angle. It was useless no matter how you attacked. You could not win. Kwake Murong Xiong, who did not know much about smithing, grinned. F***CK, your uncle. You sure are good at smithing? Who are you? How old is my nephew? At the same time, he also told the two elders who were standing beside Long Fei, "Be careful. You must protect my nephew well." Rumble. A loud explosion resounded. The black infernal energy was like a mushroom cloud, exploding into the sky. Next, Fargu Powerhouse pressed his hands together, and the explosive sound disappeared. An exquisite black lotus slowly descended. Every single petal seemed to have been polished and was incomparably exquisite. Ancient Strong held onto the black lotus and said indifferently, "It's called Wu Tian." Wu Tian? Isn't the name of this treasure too overbearing? Not even the sky. Everyone was startled. At this moment, Fargu Powerhouse moved his right hand and released the black lotus. The black lotus immediately released its energy and covered the entire God's Design attic. The sky instantly disappeared. Everything was in darkness. It was not the darkness of the night, but the darkness of the night. It was as if the sky had disappeared. All the entire scene was in chaos. Presbyter of God's tribe laughed excitedly. "Kid, did you see that? This is the real ancient alchemy. Who do you think you are? Contempt the God's tribe? Contempt the Emperor Xian? Fighting with the God's tribe? Ha ha! You are just one ant among thousands of ants, and you want to overturn the heavens with just a little ant? Ridiculous! Laughable! Ha ha!" The clan members were boiling with excitement. The divine treasures refined by the Ancient Strong were too powerful. They could even cover the sky. Everything was under the control of the Black Lotus. This kind of divine treasure was definitely an existence of super artifact in the universal realm. Who could refine such a divine treasure? Kwake, he could be considered the #1 refiner of the universal realm. Even the God's Design craftsman would not be able to refine it. This a match. God's tribe was victorious. Just when everyone thought that Ancient Strong would win, an ear-piercing sound came out. Clang, clang, clang. Every sparks flew from every blow. It's so dazzling in the dark. It moved. Master Ancestor has started forging. Abbot Whitebrow cried out in alarm. Weeks the surroundings quieted down, and everyone's gaze turned towards Long Fei. Only seeing that Long Fei did not use ancient alchemy. His refining movements were not gaudy either. Knock after knock, it was like he was a blacksmith working in a blacksmith shop in the countryside. Ha ha ha! This was also called refining. This is called forging. This is so funny. Brat, I think you're scared silly. You can refine a hammer like that. What a joke! Refining, there were a lot of things that needed to be paid attention to. However, one thing was important: spiritual energy, such as if he didn't even have spiritual power, then he wasn't refining, but forging. Long Fei was now like a blacksmith. Every time his hammer landed, there would not be any spiritual energy left. Ancient Strong also laughed coldly. Looking at Long Fei's hammer on the left and right, he could not help but say, "I overestimated you." He looked at her coldly. There was no comparison between the two. It was completely a day, and one of them was in the infernal realm, an existence that even looking up to would not be able to reach. Everyone in the venue was laughing at him. Even the disciples of the God's Design attic were looking down, unable to bear to continue watching. This was because this kind of refining method was not something that could be performed on the stage. It was just like fighting a blacksmith. Mourning, F***CK. Remember these people who have mocked my nephew before. All of them will die in the next round. Laughing at my nephew? Have you asked me? This is so infuriating. Mourning with his hands on his waist, Rong Xiong's anger could not help but wish that he could instantly kill all the people who mocked Long Fei. The jeers rose and fell. Dragonfly as if she didn't hear him. It was still one hammer beating after another. However, with every strike on his heart, there would be a faint movement. The forging soul in his body was surging, as if they could feel the mocking laughter from the surroundings. They were roaring. Apparatus, the refining techniques of the Soul Clan, was slowly being wielded by Long Fei. It was being wielded by the hammer. It was being wielded by the hammer slowly. And the law was mediocre. But yes. However, the power was surging crazily, and no one could see it. Kid, do you still want to continue? That's not necessary, is it? Do you not think your loss is ugly enough? Ha ha ha. You're just wasting your time. You can't win. Just tremble. Everyone laughed. It was also at this time. Dragon after the last hammer strike. He looked up and said lightly, "It's done." Done. Long Fei kept the hammer that the Horcrux's family gave him and looked at the Ancient Strong in the darkness. Done. Long Fei kept the hammer that the Horcrux's family gave him and looked at the ancient strong in the darkness. At this moment, the Black Lotus was still covering the sky. God's design attic was still in darkness. Not only that, the Black Lotus was not only blocking the sky above God's design attic, his power was slowly being released. He wanted to refine the entire God's design attic. It allowed all life here to turn into the power of the Black Lotus. As soon as Long Fei finished his sentence, Presbyter of God's tribe laughed and said, "Brat, what can you refine? Is it a hoe or an iron rake? Our God's tribe does not cultivate land. You might not even be able to use these farm tools." Ha! Ha! Ha ha! Everyone burst out laughing. The ancient strong said in a heavy voice, "All of you, quiet down." The entire arena instantly fell silent. Ancient Strong sneered and said, "Let me see what kind of trash you can create." His eyes flashed with a cold light. As long as Long Fei was able to refine something weaker than him, then Long Fei would definitely die. Killing intent. At this moment, a few shadows quietly approached from within the crowd of refining masters of the sect. Murong Xiong also frowned. Not good. He wants to make a move. Li Yuanba's eyes widened as he quickened his pace. In the darkness, the undercurrents surged. In the instant that Ancient Strong's eyes flashed with a cold light, the entire refining plaza became strange. Long Fei propped it up with his right hand and said with a smile, "What was the name of the Black Lotus you refined earlier?" Ancient Strong said, "Wu Tian." Long Fei laughed. "What a coincidence. There's only one word between you and my divine treasure. Suppressing heaven." Ancient Strong's eyes suddenly exploded. His fists clenched tightly as he said sinisterly, "Brat, your words are powerful and useless. This world is about strength. I lost once before. After that, I swore to myself that I would absolutely not lose again. Even if I were to fight with someone like you who doesn't understand refining, I would go all out." "You want to defeat me? There is no one in this world who can do that." Long Fei asked with great interest. "I really want to know who you once lost to?" Ancient Strong's expression turned sinister as the corners of his eyes twitched. His eyes flashed with endless hatred as he said, "Dragon Clan." Long Fei was startled and said, "What a coincidence." Ancient Strong said, "Stop wasting time. Display the power of your divine treasure." Long Fei laughed. "I'm afraid you will lose a second time." With a lift of his palm, he floated into the air. The divine treasure he forged was also something that everyone could see. Poochie. Ha-ha. Waha. An iron cake. Oh my God, I was about to die from laughter. I thought you would forge an agricultural tool, or at the very least a kitchen knife. I didn't expect you to forge such a piece of metal. More people started to mock him. This was a godly treasure. This was clearly a piece of scrap metal. The Ancient Strong said in disdain, "You are just like this piece of metal. Both are trash." It's over. With that, the Ancient Strong activated the Black Lotus. He wanted to refine the entire God's design attic. He exerted his strength, letting out the power of the Black Lotus. Ancient Strong laughed. "Watch the waste that you have refined. Watch how he turns into powder." Boom! The Black Lotus sank. Space shook. It was also at this moment that the iron dregs on the discus were shaken off. Buzz! A bright light shot out. Golden runes appeared on the surface of the metal pancake. At this moment, it wasn't a metal pancake, but a disc. The pointer on the disc rotated. All sorts of tiny runes exploded with power one after another. This wasn't all. As soon as the Black Lotus touched the disc, the Black Lotus immediately began to crack. Ancient Strong's eyes turned sinister. Impossible, absolutely impossible. The power from his body surged out and was completely channeled into the Black Lotus. The black infernal energy emitted from his body became even more ferocious. Streams of infernal energy smashed into the disc. But the glowing disc completely ignored it. It was completely useless. No matter how it attacked, it was like a boulder, not moving at all. Impossible. Impossible. I definitely won't lose a second time. Absolutely not. Ancient Strong acted like he had gone mad, releasing all the power from his body and started attacking crazily. It was completely useless. The more he attacked, the more eye-piercing the light on the disc became. It floated in midair like a sun. The entire God's Design attic became clear again. Those who had mocked Long Fei earlier turned mute one by one, raising their heads to look at the sky. At this time, they were speechless. The faces of the elders of the gods' tribe turned ugly, clenching their fists tightly, as though they were trying to use more strength. Boom, boom, boom. He continued to bombard the disc. The more he attacked, the more intense the light from the Black Lotus's disc became. The black murderous aura of the Black Lotus was completely dispelled by the dazzling light, leaving only a lonely Black Lotus in the air that continued to crack. Hoo. Impossible, Ancient Strong bellowed. I'm the strongest blacksmith in the ancient world. No one can compare to me. It is impossible for me to lose again. He exploded forth with his strength. An even more powerful force was unleashed. Long Fei said faintly, "You have attacked so many times. Is it now my turn to attack?" Boom! Subdue! The disc moved, and a golden light covered everything. Walala! All of the Black Lotuses were transformed into dust. It was also at this time that the sky seemed like it was going to split open. The energy released by the disc was too strong, and even the sky could not withstand it. He saw the Black Lotus break apart. The center of Ancient Strong's brows tightened and let out a primal roar. Roar! The clothes on his body were ripped apart. The veil also flew out, revealing her true appearance. The entire audience was stunned. Everyone was retreating, their faces pale and their hearts trembling. His appearance was extremely ugly. His nose was sunken, and his eyes were protruding. His body seemed to be made up of all sorts of things, as if he was a cripple who had yet to finish evolving. Long Fei had seen all kinds of demons and monsters, but he had never seen anything that had yet to evolve. However, regardless if he finished evolving or not, Long Fei did not care, because he only recognized the boss. Ancient Strong revealed his true appearance, baring his teeth, his eyes staring straight at Long Fei. Die. Boom! He rushed forward. Space itself shattered. Everything around Long Fei shattered. Even the elders of the Xiaoyao City who were hiding in space were exposed. His eyes widened in shock. The only thing he could say was, "Young lord, be careful." Long Fei smirked. Damn, the boss is going berserk. Enraged, he directly went berserk. Enraged, he directly went berserk. The glow on the boss body turned from gold to dark red. In this situation, the boss strength, speed, and attack attributes will be increased by twofold. Similarly, in terms of defense, it was reduced by twofold. The power unleashed by the Ancient Strong was extremely terrifying and unstoppable. His speed was once again so fast that no one could react to it. At this moment, Murong Xiong's eyes turned sinister. He wanted to charge forward, but it was too late. On the other side, the aura around the Yuanba's body was also violently churning, and he wanted to rush up as soon as possible, but it was similarly too late. Brother Yuanba, seeing Li Yuanba rushing out, the space between the two of them tightened, and their gazes fell on Long Fei's body at the same time. Boss! Instantly, the two King Kongs suddenly moved as well. Xiao Bai and Binghua also moved. However, no matter who it was, they were unable to catch up to the falling Ancient Strong's attacks in terms of speed. In other words, no one could block this attack for Long Fei. Presbyter of Gods, tribe laughed proudly. So what if I can refine a high-level divine treasure? What did this world rely on? It's not a weapon, but a fist. You are merely a piece of trash from the warrior realm. Ha ha ha. Ha ha. Who else could resist the Ancient Strong's attack? Not to mention a dregs of the warrior realm. Even a peak overlord powerhouse would not necessarily be able to withstand a single blow. How could the power of the ancient world be enough to contend against the power of the ancient world? Little bastard, tremble. Ha! Presbyter of God's tribe laughed loudly. Long Fei's brows shook, then said indifferently, "You're right. This world does not rely on artifact forging, but on fists." However, as he said that, Long Fei's lips curled. "Do you think your fist is as big as my fist?" He raised his eyes. He turned his gaze to Zhen Tian in the sky and laughed softly. "It has always been you who has been attacking. Now it's time for my divine treasure to explode. Sun's soul, subdue." Long Fei moved and activated his heavenly treasure. All the power in the world surged. Boom! Wong! An ear-piercing hum exploded. In an instant, the strong light blinded everyone's eyes, and the entire God's Design attic was enveloped in the strong light. It was incomparably powerful. Long Fei was a divine treasure refined, using the Horcrux's family's refining techniques. At the same time, there was a forging soul in the divine treasure. What surprised Long Fei was that the released forging soul was actually Yang Soul, the third ranked among the 10 great forging soul S, the super artifact soul. How could its power be comparable to the power of the ancient world? The blinding light enveloped everything. No one could open their eyes, not even the ancient strong who had pounced on them. What is this? It's too hot. Is the sun going to explode? This is too hard to bear. It's as if the entire world is on fire. The people on the God's tribe side all looked in pain. Their bodies were trembling non-stop. They did not dare open their eyes. And when they did, they felt as though they would be blinded by the intense light. Many people cried out in pain. Ancient Strong, who was flying towards him, belonged to the special species that had not evolved well. Like a mutated human, he felt an intense light and his eyes widened in anger. In that instant, he let out a painful cry, and his eyes began to emit black smoke. Blind. He had become blind in an instant. How intense was this light? However, Ancient Strong did not stop. Furthermore, when he opened his eyes earlier, he saw the location of Long Fei. Die! Boom! Rumble! The sky darkened, and it was as if the power of a whole new heaven was crushing towards Long Fei. Long Fei's body slightly sank and said in a displeased tone, "Fuck, fighting if you can't win in a match. For something like the MMP, you still want to kill me?" Sun's soul, suppress. Long Fei felt very uncomfortable. His cultivation was too low. If not for the protection of the body of Towdy, he would have been smashed to smithereens by now. If this palm attack landed, he definitely wouldn't be able to stop it. He was now an ant, and the Ancient Strong was as big as an elephant. The difference in power was simply too great. However, even so, Long Fei did not take a step back. The power in the boundless heaven changed once again as a shadow flew out. Ancient Strong slapped his palm down. Die! He roared. In an instant, the shadow flew out, superimposing on Long Fei's body. The shadow changed, becoming a giant, godlike existence. He blocked the attack with a palm strike. Buzz! Rumble! Rumble! The two forces clashed. Roars came from all directions, and the God's Design attic were almost unable to endure it as several mountains fell to the ground. The cracks in space continued to spread out. Everyone present was trembling in their hearts. They could not even stand steadily. The fear of death assaulted them, as if it was the end of the world. Many people were so scared that they directly kneeled on the ground. Miserable screams rang out. In the sky, Ancient Strong's huge palm print was still pressed on the ground in midair. The shadow of the Sun Soul on Long Fei's body did not move at all. The power disappeared and the light dimmed. The crushing pressure on the plaza weakened. Many people raised their heads to look at the sky and gulped down their saliva. The scene before them was like a battle between gods. He could only look up, but he couldn't do anything about it. Everyone stopped. Even the three great Vajra, who had been madly rushing forward, stopped in their tracks. They were also shocked, because, at this moment, Ancient Strong's body was cracking. Crack! Ka! Bang bang! His body was cracking like a stone statue, first with his palm, and then with his palm. The giant palm slowly turned to ash. Then there was the huge body. Boom! 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 The corner of Long Fei's mouth raised upwards and secretly laughed. Imp, it's fortunate that Zhen Wu Tian absorbed so much power just now. If not, this move would have been very hard to deal with. Long Fei's refining techniques was very strong. However, refining techniques could only be strong in the refining force. His cultivation was still in the warrior realm, and in the universal realm, he was in existence at level 1. So no matter how strong the divine treasure he refined was, it was useless if he did not have the strength to activate it. However, just now, Zhen Wutian had crazily absorbed the energy released by the Black Lotus, and only then could he see the scene of the sun's soul possessing the body. The power of the sun soul crushed the darkness element, completely suppressing it. Of course, it wasn't that Long Fei couldn't block this palm. It was just that he still had the power of the Tao Tai. Just that would expose him too much. This palm attack was something the body of Tao Ti could endure, and he himself would probably be injured as well. Walala! Long Fei looked at the hundreds of meters long wound on Ancient Strong's head, which was shrinking crazily. He smiled and said excitedly, "It's going to explode." His HP continued to drop rapidly. Ancient Strong's body was also wildly collapsing. The string of damage numbers on top of his head was uncountable. Haha, it's going to explode. It's going to explode. Long Fei was a little impatient, even though he had been to the Hall of Eternal Life before, and any divine treasure of the universal realm was useless to him. However, at this moment, he couldn't help but get excited. No matter how many bosses they killed, the moment the boss was about to drop, they couldn't help but be excited. Walala! Walala! Large chunks of blood were shed one after another. Ancient Strong's body continued to turn into fine powder as he floated down. Everyone looked at the sky in a daze. How did this happen? No, impossible. He's the Ancient Strong. He's the Ancient Strong. How could this be? He's the Ancient Strong that the Emperor Xian brought out from the ancient world. It's impossible for him to lose. Impossible. The faces of the elders of the gods' tribe twisted one after another. He had lost in refining. Now, even the Ancient Strong was defeated with a single move. Something unacceptable. Too strong. One move, just one move. A move from the warrior realm. How is that possible? I just don't get it. Who is he? I don't believe that he is a warrior realm. That's impossible. On the plaza, each and every one of the sect's powerhouse has looked at Long Fei with doubt in their eyes and watched Ancient Strong's body slowly peel off. To anyone in the universal realm, the Ancient Strong was an existence that they looked up to and could not reach. Who could resist when the Ancient Strong came out to fight? However, now it was being blocked by a soldier. Their brains were all twitching. Looking at the shocked expressions on the plaza, Xiao Bai and the others were extremely excited. No matter what happened, even if Long Fei split the sky, they would not feel anything amiss. Because he is Long Fei. He was a miracle. He was an invincible existence. Anything strange or unbelievable to him was normal. They couldn't wait to run out and loudly shout at the world. Did you see that? He is my boss. His name is Long Fei. Did you all see him? The excitement was indescribable. It was hard to describe it with words. Xiao Bai and the rest stood there, quietly staring at Long Fei, who was on the refining platform, all of them smiling and excited without uttering a sound. Just like that, Long Fei continued to posture from afar. There was only one word in their hearts. Awesome. Seeing Long Fei's explosive strength and seeing Long Fei's crushing pressure, their hearts felt even better than what they felt now. Mighty and domineering. Haha. Li Yuanba gave a silly smile and scratched his head. Why does boss need my protection? He's the boss after all. Haha. Qingyi looked at Long Fei and said indifferently, "What a freak." Ha! Ha ha! The most excited person in the entire arena was Murong Xiong. He had almost pooped out of fright, and now he saw that Long Fei had defeated Ancient Strong in one move. He smiled like his grandfather. Awesome. Awesome. It's no wonder you are my Morong Xiong's nephew, huh? No wonder you would become the #1 wanted criminal in the God's tribe. No wonder Long Zhanting was willing to bear the pain of Long Tai's devouring heart in Dragon Abyss Dungeon and didn't speak of your existence. No wonder I went all out to protect you. Kid, you're really awesome. Murong Xiong clenched his fists tightly. All the power in his body seemed to explode out. His blood was boiling. The excitement was indescribable. Walala, walala. Ancient Strong's body broke into pieces. He turned around and looked at the other Ancient Strong who was covered by a veil. His mouth was slightly opened, and a hoarse voice came out, "Save, save, save me, save." However, the Ancient Strong did not move. He did not even look up. It was as if everything that was happening around him had nothing to do with him at all. It was as if he was in the realm of divine tribes and only had his physical body left. The presbyter of gods, Tribes, looked at him. Kneel in front of him. "My lord, make you move. Master, save them. Lord, kill that kid." Indifference. There was no sound at all. The presbyter of God's tribe was in despair. Seeing that there was only a little bit of Ancient Strong left, they also wanted to keep him alive because he was the Ancient Strong. If he died, they wouldn't be able to escape punishment. They didn't even dare to think about the punishment given to them by the God's tribe. "Kid, stop right now." God's tribe will pretend like nothing happened. "You're in a hurry to stop right now." God's tribe, you can't afford to offend him. "Stop." A few of the presbyter of God's tribes said in a low voice, "If you offend the God's tribe, there's only one outcome for you, and that is death. If you stop now, I can do it in front of you and nothing will happen to me." Long Fei laughed. "God's tribe, I'm sorry. Your God tribe has long provoked me. If you don't do it, I, your father, will never rest." The few elders' eyes narrowed. No one had ever dared to speak like that. No one dared to openly provoke God's tribe. No one. One of the elders said solemnly, "Brat, who exactly are you? Do you know the consequences of your words? Even if it's your entire clan, anyone who has even the slightest bit of relationship with you would not be able to escape death." Long Fei smirked and said, "Listen well for this old man." The entire audience was stunned. Everyone looked at Long Fei. Li Yuanba also looked at Long Fei. The heavenly spirit also looked at Long Fei. Aoya looked at Long Fei as well. Murong Xiong faced Long Fei and smiled. "Xiao Bai, Ice and Fire, Elder Swordsman, Senior Mia, Queen of Blood Moon." Everyone looked at Long Fei. At this moment, Long Fei was like a sovereign of the world. "My name is Long Fei." Long Fei's eyes were fixed on a spot. Every word was filled with tyrannical power, as though it carried an endless amount of killing intent. His voice was not loud, but it resounded throughout the entire God's design attic. Presbyter of God's tribe was startled and couldn't react for a moment. "Long Fei? What Long Fei? What is Long Fei?" Suddenly, they seemed to have thought of something. Zhang Xian's eyes darkened. The faces of the elders of the God's tribe stared at Long Fei as if they were facing a great enemy and said solemnly, "You are Long Fei? That Long Fei who broke through the 9th level of heaven, who was killed by Emperor Xian several times, and was still alive even after the western regions was swallowed up by the black hole after it collapsed. You are the brat that the dragon race and Mu clan combined." Long Fei smiled faintly and said, "You remember now?" As soon as he finished, Long Fei's pupils suddenly tensed up. An incomparably strong, killing intent spread throughout the sky. Suddenly, the wind began to blow, the clouds began to surge, and the color of the sky and earth changed. In an instant, killing intent filled every corner of the God's design attic. It was as if all living creatures were trembling. Even every tree and blade of grass seemed to be trembling. His mind felt as if it had fallen into hell. Cold, infinite coldness. He crushed the entire audience so hard that he couldn't even breathe. Long Fei's pupils tightened as he thought in his heart, "What a strong, killing intent." It was also at this moment. A clear sound of footsteps came out. Ancient Strong, who had not moved at all like a Buddha, slowly walked out. Presbyter of God's tribe was shocked. He revealed an excited expression and wanted to say a few words of praise, but he couldn't say a word, and his vocal cords seemed to be stuck. He stopped 3 meters away from Long Fei and asked indifferently, "Tell me, what was your name just now?" His voice was also very calm. There was no pressure, no powerful aura, just like an ordinary sentence. However, Long Fei was 100% sure that Mi Tian's killing intent was released from his body. Very strong. So strong that Long Fei had never seen one in the universal realm before, and he felt that they were even stronger than the Emperor Xian. Of course, he had never seen the true power of the Emperor Xian before. Facing Powerhouse, Long Fei had never been one to back down. Life only has one sentence. Do not submit, just do it. Long Fei said firmly. Long Fei. The ancient strong asked again, the descendants of the dragon race? Long Fei said, "That's right." Ancient Strong said, "According to Emperor Xian, you are the reincarnation of the first dragon of ancient world?" Head Dragon, the first dragon of ancient world. He was not born from the ancient world, but was naturally born from himself, and relied on his own strength to cultivate into a dragon. He was also the #1 powerhouse in the ancient times. He created a dragon clan with one hand. However, afterwards, he was too mischievous and was invaded by the evil spirits of the other realms, angering a mighty powerhouse, and thus was directly suppressed by the repression of boundary stones. Long Fei's memories had yet to be restored, and he had forgotten many things from the past. However, even if his memory had recovered, even if he hadn't forgotten what had happened in the past, he would never admit that he was the reincarnation of some powerhouse. He was him. He was Long Fei. Long Fei said, "I don't know what dragon it is. I am me. I am Long Fei, and I am not the reincarnation of any powerhouse." Be someone else? It was not Long Fei's style. He had to do it himself. Even if it was the reincarnation of a certain powerhouse, Long Fei would never let that powerhouse take over his body. He would only take over that powerhouse. Ha ha. Ancient Strong smiled lightly. The smile was very strange. His eyes became cold as he said, "Back then, he also said something like that. It looks like you really are the reincarnation of the first dragon. I didn't expect this. I really didn't expect this. I really didn't expect to meet you here. Maybe you don't remember me, but I've never forgotten you." While they were talking, he removed the veil covering his head, revealing a face that was scarred like a giant centipede. The scar extended from between his eyebrows and went straight through his mouth. It just sat there on his face. It looked extremely horrifying. Many people looked at it and felt their hearts tremble. They didn't dare to look at it again. Scar Man sneered. "Remember now? How many years have I had this face? Thanks to you. I don't know. I've been looking for. The entire time I was waiting, I knew that the repression of boundary stones couldn't take your life. You aren't a person who accepts your fate. I knew that one day you would definitely come back. The second time. Today, you finally appeared. Ha ha, ha ha." Suddenly, he started to laugh maniacally. The wind screamed, and the land quaked. God's design attic began to crack. Just this laugh alone, Secret World was unable to take it anymore. The refining chief masteress that those sects had brought with them rolled on the ground with their hands over their ears, crying out miserably in pain. Some people directly bled to death. Who is he? He couldn't help but ask. Li Yuanba did not say anything. All the veins in his body bulged, and he clenched his fists tightly, like a leopard that was about to take action. He was like a leopard facing a great enemy. The moment that person moved, he would immediately charge out. The same goes for Sky Spirit and Oya. His entire body tensed up. They did not know what had happened in the past, nor did they know who this Scar Man was. But the aura on his body told them that this person was extremely dangerous. It was even more dangerous than the powerhouse that controlled the power of ancient inheritance. Long Face said faintly, "Although I am not a dragon, looking at your appearance, you have already determined that I am a dragon. All right, just treat me as a dragon then." And then, not at all. On the contrary. However, Long Fei was excited in his heart. This boss was even stronger than the boss in the sky that was still in the process of dying. Moreover, the two bosses were of a completely different level. This boss was much stronger. He calculated in his heart. Can the mini black holes suck him to death? What if it doesn't die? I don't have anything else to rely on. Long Fei's heart tensed up. Thinking of the system's intelligent sister, he could not help but call out, "System girl, what weakness does he have?" The little sister was still curled up in her lotus, sleeping quietly. She had no intention of waking up. Long Fei muttered and said, "You've already slept for so long. Are you still not awake?" The intellectual brain system could help him calculate everything. But now, the little sister was in a deep sleep, so she had no way to rely on him. If he couldn't rely on others, then he could only rely on himself. Long Fei stared at Scarman. Scarman smiled lightly and said sinisterly, "Then, I will kill you." As soon as the word dead fell, the space around Long Fei suddenly shattered. The two elders of the Xiao Yao City in the space were also instantly crushed into pools of blood. The corner of Long Fei's eyes twitched. Scarman chuckled. "Don't worry, I won't let you die so comfortably. I will let you die slowly, in another place, at the entrance of God's Design City. Holy *T. I told you. We should have done it earlier." The Wild King held the God's Design token in his hand and walked to the entrance with a smug face. He placed the God's Design token on top of it and said, "Can you let me in now?" Young Taoist clasped his hands together. "What is sin?" In the distance, two blacksmiths fell to the ground. Kuang Wang disdainfully said, "What is sin? You're not a monk. You're a Taoist. What are you guilty of? Let's go. We still don't know what's happened to our boss. Let's find our boss first. Then we can destroy this city." The Wild King rubbed the bridge of his nose, showing that he was in a bad mood. It was unclear how much time had passed. Hatred did not disappear with the passing of time, but was instead like wine. The more time passed, the deeper his memories became. It was unclear how much time had passed. Hatred did not disappear with the passing of time, but was instead like wine. The more time passed, the deeper his memories became. The humiliation of that year was something that he would remember forever. It was all for the sake of being able to take revenge one day. This time, he originally only wanted to have a simple look at Universal Realm and didn't have any other thoughts. There was no one worthy of him taking action in a place like the Universal Realm. Even if the ancient artifact forging powerhouse was suppressed by Long Fei and they were about to die, he did not want to save them. Everything in the world had nothing to do with him. However, when he found out about Long Fei, when he thought of what the Emperor Xian had said to him, the hatred in his heart exploded like liquor that had been sealed for hundreds of millions of years. His eyes were cold. With excitement, he looked at Long Fei and said, "The time has finally come for me. I will slowly play with you until you die." Ha! As soon as he finished, he flicked his finger. Buzz! A sharp light flashed from the tip of his finger, and the Scar Man laughed. "Let me punch a hole in your body first." It was extremely interesting. The power revolved back and forth on his fingertip. It looked like an ordinary power, but, however, it was like a laser cannon. As long as it was fired, it would destroy the world. Many years ago, I was able to leave a scar on your face. That was because I taught you a lesson and made you remember this. Who would have thought that after all these years, your memory did not improve at all? Back then, you weren't my opponent. Do you still think you're my opponent now? Long Fei was not afraid. On his body, other than the power of Tao Tai, there was also a power of eternity that he did not control very well. This power, not a joke, let alone a boss like the Scar Man. Even if the strongest Emperor Xian was in front of him, he wouldn't reveal any fear. Scar Man gritted his teeth and said in a heavy voice, "Your mouth hasn't changed at all. Then let me punch a hole in it first." Buzz! With a move of his fingertips, he shot towards Long Fei. Long Fei frowned. The idea moved Tao. Before he had even released his power of Tao Dai, he felt a figure blocking his front. The figure was huge, over 2 meters tall. It was big, and the muscles on its body bulged out like granite. Naked to the waist, the power released from his body was purely physical. Powerful. His aura was abnormally strong. Long Fei's eyes tensed up. King Kong, Li Yuanba. Boom! Li Yuanba's body descended and punched towards the incoming laser. Pure physical power. There was nothing flashy about it. That punch. Bang! Rumble. When the laser exploded, the space fluctuated and waves of space rippled outwards, completely unable to resist it. The entire audience was stunned. Li Yuanba turned around and naively said, "Boss, that time I didn't recognize you." He was frustrated himself. That time, he did not recognize Long Fei, and this whole year, he had been very upset. He wanted nothing more than to retreat, and he would never be able to recognize Long Fei again. Long Fei laughed. "I'm fine. Actually, I'm not too sure either that you're my King Kong, my memories." Li Yuanba clenched both his fists and said, "I know. I will definitely grind that dog Emperor Xian to pieces." It was also at this time. Scarman slowly stopped. The elders of the gods' tribe all secretly trembled. "King Kong, Holy King Kong Li Yuanba. It's him, it's really him. He's actually in God's design attic. What a good God's design craftsman. You actually dare to hide a felon from your God's tribe. Just this point is enough to turn your God's design attic into ashes." Very arrogant, but their hearts were also filled with fear. The surrounding clan-level powerhouse all whispered, "Is he the great Vajra, the fierce man who killed all of Violet Gold, Godguard's men? The second most wanted felon in God's tribe is the Holy King Kong." That means that the person called Long Fei is really... Oh my God. No wonder he is God's tribe's #1 wanted criminal. The King Kong is here? What about the other King Kong? Legend has it that the 8th King Kong is the protector of the dragon race and is the 8 great heaven pillars that support the ancient world. The Holy King Kong is the leader, and the Holy King Kong is the tail. For a moment, there was panic. On the God's tribe's side, the elders' expression changed. Listening to these discussions, their hearts began to pound. Ever since Li Yuanba left the ancient world, there had been many legends of King Kong. Even though they had been chasing and killing all over the place, they had never tried to kill King Kong. The power of King Kong caused them to tremble in fear. Has the news arrived? Did the shrine send anyone to support us? Hurry up. If we catch those two, we'll be rich. At this time, Scarman looked coldly at Li Yuanba, the corners of his mouth slightly hooked up, and said, 8 King Kong? 8 heaven pillar? Your ancient world? Ha ha! How ridiculous! Scarman's finger moved again as he channeled the power at the tip of his finger, saying indifferently, "Ancient world is a mother world, and it reproduces to the mother plane of existence. Its power is not something that a few heaven pillar can support, you know." That year, in his era, there were no 8 great heaven pillar, no 8 King Kong, nor were there any guardians of the dragon race. At the time in Long family, the #1 family did not need any guardians at all. There was no such thing as the 8 heaven pillar. However, the ancient world was so big that it was unimaginable. Even though the Scarman was the most ancient group of powerhouses, he still did not completely understand the ancient world. He only knew that the ancient world was a matriarchal plane, reproducing to everything. Just like the mother plane, Li Yuanba turned and stood in front of Long Fei to protect him. Long Fei secretly thought, "Be careful." At the same time, Long Fei was controlling the Yang soul, slowing down the speed of death of the ancient artifact forging powerhouse. Li Yuanba nodded heavily and said, "I will." Scarman's lips curled up, die. With a move of his 5 fingers, the power of the ancient world erupted. 5 rays of light shot out from his fingertips, directly locking Li Yuanba's entire body in place. Li Yuanba was not afraid, and his arms sank down. Wong. His strength had turned into an astral form. An enormous defensive power was released out of nowhere. However, at this moment, A sword struck out. Break! 5 laser beams were pierced through. The sword hummed. A sword floated in mid-air. A lady in tight robes slowly descended. Her expression was as though a Valkyrie had descended. It was incomparably cool. Sword Force King Kong, Aoya. Everyone was tongue-tied as they looked up at the sky. Everyone was looking at her. However, she was looking at a person. A sword to shake the heavens. A sword to shake the heavens. All the swords in God's design attic were trembling and releasing booming sounds. It was not because of how strong that sword was, it was because that sword was extremely weak. Any sword in the God's design attic was stronger than it, but she was the leader of all the 10,000 swords. The 10,000 swords groaned and bowed, because the sword intent of the person who used this sword, its ancient profoundness was incomparable. Aoya landed. Everyone looked at her. The only person she looked at was Long Fei. Long Fei was also looking at him, and his heart thumped for a moment. It was as if he had broken through his memory, and all sorts of obscure memory fragments appeared in his mind. Within the academy, Oya was a teacher. Long Fei passed on to her the unique skill of the sword lady. The scenes appeared one after another. Long Fei's heart secretly tensed up. Their gazes met. Aoya took a step forward and stood in front of Long Fei. The two of them looked at each other for a few seconds. Without saying a word, Aoya directly threw herself into Long Fei's embrace. Long Fei hugged onto it tightly. His heart raced. Plop, plop. Hearing Long Fei's heartbeat, Aoya said softly, "Your heart is beating really fast." Long Fei said, "You are so little, your chest is so big, and it's pressing down on my body. If my heart doesn't beat fast, then I wouldn't be normal." Although she was dressed in tight clothes, she did not have a lot of clothes on her body. She was just like the holy artifact female hero from the movies. Whether it was her clothes or her looks, they were both far better than the mysterious female hero. Especially the chest. It could only be described with one word. Domineering. With such a woman in your arms, who wouldn't feel their heart beating faster? No man can control it. Oya said softly, "Scoundrel." As he said, "Scoundrel," his body was even more tightly locked within Long Fei's embrace, like a little kitten that was unceasingly burrowing into his embrace. She had longed for this moment for a long time. After being in the ancient world for 100 years, he was constantly thinking about Long Fei and constantly thought about staying in Long Fei's embrace. He did nothing and calmly leaned on her. Now, this simple wish had finally been fulfilled. She quietly laid in Long Fei's embrace, enjoying the sweetest time of her life. At this moment, there was nothing in her world, only Long Fei. Li Yuanba did not turn back. He was completely on guard against Scarman. No matter what happened after that, he would never look back. He was Long Fei's guardian diamond. Sword Force King Kong. Another King Kong has appeared. Oh my God. Won't 8 King Kong really all appear? She's so beautiful. I've never seen such a beautiful woman before. She's just like an immortal. Just looking at her makes me feel like I'm blaspheming her. But she threw herself into the arms of another man. My heart ached. It feels so bad. Oya was beautiful. She was very pretty and straightforward. She didn't need any decorations, just that simple and efficient. Furthermore, she was never shy. If she liked someone, then she liked them. She wanted to express her love for him, but when she walked to Long Fei's side, she did not even bother to look at the people around her and directly hugged him. It was direct. This was her like a sword. Presbyter of God's tribe's brows tightened. They couldn't even withstand a single King Kong. If it wasn't for the presence of another ancient strong, they would have already been dead by now. They probably only needed to run for their lives. And now another King Kong. Yizichen's heart once again tightened. The elders' faces were no longer as arrogant as before. They looked at each other and only thought of how to get reinforcements here quickly. Scarman glanced at Aoya and smiled with interest. Not bad. This is the first time I have seen someone who can cultivate the way of the sword to such a level. The first of the 10,000 swords. What a pity, what a pity. Scarman's smile turned cold. It's a pity that I don't have any interest in women anymore. If not, you would have been able to live for a few more days. Aoya lightly came out of Long Fei's embrace, turned around, and walked to the great Vudra's side, then said, Yuan Ba, do you want to go up, or should I? Li Yuan Ba smiled lightly and said, There's no rush. There's still one more that hasn't come out yet. Aoya was startled. Is there anyone else who has left the ancient world? Li Yuanba laughed. Aoya retracted the sword intent on her body, quietly looked at Scarman, and said, If you have the ability, then display it. Scarman's eyes turned sinister. Boom! In the blink of an eye, an extremely powerful force exploded from within his body. The laser light covered his entire body as a wolf slowly floated up. Its two dark red wolf eyes stared at him and let out a roar. Wolf break. Whoosh! The wolf shadow impulsively pounced toward the two of them. Li Yuanba did not move. Oya did not move. The two King Kong felt as if they were ignoring Scarman. Long Fei also did not move. He was still controlling the ancient artifact forging powerhouse's blood volume, because this was his trump card. If he could not endure it, he could immediately upgrade it to replace everything else. This was the same as having another chance to revive in one place. Long Fei would not easily use it. Moreover, this Scarman was constantly increasing his own strength, but these forces were not his strongest forces at all. They had lived for hundreds of millions of years. How could such an old monster possess such power? He showed his strength as if it were for a 3-year-old. Vajra. Aoya didn't display her strongest power, but compared to the Scarman, even Long Fei was not sure. How much did his 100 years of experience, did his memory of the seal improve? How strong was the ancient world? All of this was unknown to Long Fei. It would be best if Kong Kim could win. If he couldn't, he also had to fight. Long Fei was extremely careful. He did not want his memory to be sealed by the seal again, nor did he want to reincarnate or be reborn. He did not want his fate to be controlled again. Rumble, rumble, rumble. The laser wolf rushed out, incomparably vicious. Li Yuanba smiled lightly. Tianling, it's your turn. Ha. A sinister, terrifying laugh rang out. It was as if the voice had come from hell itself. The hearts of everyone present immediately turned cold, and the temperature around them plummeted. A youth that looked like an evil child walked out. With every step he took, the small flowers and grass on the ground instantly withered, and the bluestone floor turned into dust. Seemed so. He was death. He would die if he touched anything in the world. His appearance caused everyone's eyes to narrow. It seemed like he was walking very slowly, but in the blink of an eye, the heavenly spirit was standing right in front of Li Yuanba and Aoya. He let out a deep shout. The flames burst out of his body. With an evil smile, he said, It's my turn. Rumble, rumble, rumble. The flames surged. The wolf's shadow instantly shattered. A huge death shockwave was released. The presbyter of God's tribe instantly tumbled on the ground. He was in an extremely sorry state. Presbyter of God's tribe rolled on the ground. Presbyter of God's tribe rolled on the ground. Those sect-level refiners were directly sent flying. For a moment, the entire sky was filled with people. One by one, their bodies began to slowly shrivel under the flames of death. The holy source on his body was sucked dry. Bang, bang, bang. One by one, they fell down, just like hail. After falling to the ground, these sect-level artificers didn't even have the time to get up before their faces turned sinister and their pupils dimmed. They wanted to let out terrible screams of pain. However, his body stiffened and was quickly petrified. In the end, they created strange shapes one after another. A cool breeze blew past. Walala, walala, walala. All of them were reduced to powder. The presbyter of God's tribe were slightly better. Their cultivations were much stronger than the sect powerhouse and they weren't blasted flying, but their bodies were also severely injured, and their minds were like scythes that could descend at any time. This feeling was too unbearable. In a short moment, the 10,000 refining masters of the sects had all died. Not a single one remained. The crowded square suddenly became spacious and empty. The blow from the 10,000 mountains from the sky spirit was a complete mess. However, Scarman did not even move. When the death aura rushed towards him, it directly broke apart. It was also because of this that Presbyter of God's tribe was able to escape from his clutches. Otherwise, it would be hard for them to escape death, even if their cultivation was strong. The heavenly spirit patted his hands, turned around and looked at Long Fei, and giggled, saying, "Boss, my way of appearing on stage to show off, isn't it? Although it is not as eye-catching as the violet gold Godgar that Brother Yuan Ba killed, it is not bad. In front of Long Fei, he looked just like a child. The heavenly spirit was brought out by Long Fei from the underworld. His body was extremely special. Not a human, not a ghost, not a demon, not a demon. However, he was born in the underworld, so he had an incomparably strong power of death. Long Fei looked at him and said, "Putting on airs." The celestial spirit smiled even more happily. On the God's tribe side, not to mention arrogant faces, every one of them had now become extremely afraid. They hid behind Scarman and trembled, not even daring to breathe. They were afraid that if the sky spirit moved again, they would understand their little lives. The elders of the God's design attic were all dumbstruck. The appearance of the three Vajra was like the appearance of a god. Moreover, what was even more unbearable was that these three gods called each other Big Brother Long Fei. White Brow swallowed a huge mouthful of saliva, looked at Long Fei, and once again rejoiced in his heart. Too strong. With just an aura, he annihilated so many sects powerhouses. There's no lack of peak overlord powerhouse among these powerhouse. They're all gone just like that. Oh my God, is there a limit to the realm of the martial arts training? I have never seen such a scene before. What kind of realm is this exactly? If the three King Kong are so strong, if the 8 King Kong were to gather all of them, what realm would they be at? At first, I was worried that I would not live past today, but now I am worried that those Presbyter of God's tribe might not be able to survive anymore. After killing so many God's tribe dogs, will the God's tribe destroy our God's design attic? With Master Ancestor here, why would I be afraid of birds? So what if I am a God tribe? So what if it was the Emperor Xian? He makes us unhappy, and we make him even more unhappy. The strength displayed by the three great Vajra was too ferocious. He was completely an existence of the divine immortal stage. After the sky spirit descended, Scarman smiled faintly and said, "3 King Kong. Ha! The guardian of the Long family? Ha! The heaven pillar that supports the ancient world? Ha ha!" Without saying a word, he laughed heartily. Tian Ling was not happy and directly scolded, "I'm laughing at your sister." The Scarman smile faded. His eyes turned sinister as he said solemnly, "A group of ignorant fools. What kind of heaven pillar are you? You think you're strong? Do you think that your little strength can protect the Long family? You still want to support the ancient world? Today, I will let you all know the power of the ancient world." Boom! His strength exploded. Crack! God's design attic's surroundings instantly cracked, and cracks continuously flew out. Moreover, one by one, the floating mountains began to sink down. The law energy lost its balance. The secret world belonged to a small plane and had its own independent law. However, compared to the large plane, the laws of the realm of the secret world were a little weaker. But no matter how weak they were, not everyone could mess up their laws, much less lose balance with their power of law. The power of the Scarman was beyond imagination. Damn, it exploded. F*CK your grandma. I want to see what you can explode with. The first thing that came out of her displeasure was that she was about to charge forward. However, this secret world won't be able to withstand a single person's strength. If we were to use our power again, this secret world will be directly destroyed at that time. We're not afraid, but what about the people here? Where's boss? Li Yuanba was worried that Long Fei would be threatened a little. Aoya nodded. The King Kong is right. I'll break through the sky. You two take him into the void. As soon as he finished, Aoya's sword struck out. The long sword cut through the air heavily. Walala! The sky shattered, and the initially blue sky turned pitch black. The entire God's Design attic was thrown into chaos. Li Yuanba's body slightly sank. His body leaned forward, and then bang! It charged forward like a ferocious beast. He landed in front of Scarman and wrapped his arms around her. He suddenly hugged the Scarman. Scarman sneered, stared at Li Yuanba, and said, "Your fist does have some power, but just this kind of power? Too weak." The lasers on his body burst out. The sky spirit also fell down, and its eyes turned malevolent. Spirit integration. Buzz. The spirit energy wrapped around Li Yuanba's body, and Li Yuanba's body immediately turned into a cage, binding Scarman within. The space between Scarman's eyebrows tightened. Combining powers? Just as he was about to break through, the sky spirit suddenly shouted, "Rise!" Li Yuanba's legs grew wide as he brought Scarman up into the air. He directly dashed into the void. Aoya looked at Long Fei and said, "Wait for me." The long sword fell. The ruptured sky was sewn up again. All of this happened very quickly, and in just a few seconds, it caused everyone to be dazzled. After the four of them left God's Design attic, the entire secret world calmed down, and the entire place became quiet. The deities left, returning to peace. However, a presbyter of God's tribe suddenly let out a sound of excitement. "Haha, it's here, it's here." The three King Kong left and brought Scarman to another world to fight. The three King Kong left and brought Scarman to another world to fight. What was the result? I don't know. This was also something that Long Fei couldn't care less about right now. Even if he wanted to, he wouldn't be able to. Seeing them leave, Long Fei's heart trembled. They're going to fight to the outer space? The God's Design attic regained its calm. Long Fei looked at the ancient artifact forging powerhouse. He really wanted to reap his fate, and he thought to himself, "Scarman has left. I'll blast you, this boss, to death." However, at this moment, a few presbyter of God's tribes were sure that the three Vajra had left. Once again, they revealed their arrogant faces and shouted out, "Men, surround this brat." God's tribe guards quickly surrounded Long Fei. Presbyter of God's tribe laughed excitedly. "I found you all over the place. I got it effortlessly. Master Emperor Xian has always wanted to find you. Even with the 10,000 Worlds Hunt Squad, he wasn't able to kill you. I didn't expect to meet you here. It really is lucky." Haha. Long Fei, did you obediently surrender yourself? Or did you want us to take action? Who is Long Fei? Emperor Xian called out the people he wanted to capture. He was the #1 wanted criminal in the God's tribe, and one that the Emperor Xian had personally promised to take. Whoever caught Long Fei or killed him would receive a large amount of rewards. The power of ancient inheritance. Countless powerhouse wanted to find Long Fei's head, but they couldn't find it. It was right in front of their eyes, so how could they let it go? Long Fei was startled and asked, "Are you sure?" Presbyter of God's tribe laughed coldly. "You bastard, do you think you can still act so arrogantly? The power you displayed just now was only that of the refining force. And the reason why this ancient strong lost was because the things you refined were rather powerful. But if King Kong is not here, we can't compete with crafting. To compete in martial arts. Kid, you should be more honest. This way, I will make you suffer less." The presbyter of God's tribe laughed. To them, Long Fei was a great gift. He had to take them down. Who dares to touch him? The first thing, a woman's voice sounded. Not Long Fei's woman, but Li Yuanba's woman. Qingyi walked out and landed beside Long Fei to protect him. She stared at the presbyter of God's tribe and coldly said, "If I were you, I would leave with my tail between my legs right now." Qingyi's appearance caused presbyter of God's tribe to shudder. "Qingyi, you God tribe traitor are still alive. Traitor, you think you can protect him? Qingyi, you still have a choice. Don't let me kill you again when the time comes." Ah. Long Fei was also startled, He did not expect Ching Yi to actually come out and protect him, and thought to himself, seems like Li Yuanba taught her quite well, huh? It was also at this time. Everyone from God's design attic rushed forward, protect the ancestor. Bai Mei rushed forward with his men, and took out all of the holy artifacts. Their martial prowess was indeed not strong, but each of them held a few holy artifacts in their hands. If you can't beat them, they can just smash you to death with their holy artifact. The presbyter of God's tribe trembled and said coldly, seems like your God design attic is truly courting death. Fighting with my God's tribe? Abbot Whitebrow shouted. What about your God's tribe? If you dare hurt even a single hair of the ancestor today, this old man will fight you to the death. At first, Bai Mei looked down on Long Fei. He felt regret for his past self. Now that he had the chance to vote for it, wouldn't he have to seize this opportunity? If they missed it this time, then there really wouldn't be any God's design attic left in this world. Powerhouse of God's tribe was not scared just because Abbot Whitebrow had stepped forward, but he was even more disdainful. He glanced at the old and weak God's design attic and sneered. There is one who isn't afraid of death. Fight with the God's tribe? Very good. I want to see how many are not afraid of death today. All of you come out. As soon as he finished, Xiao Yao Xiong took a step out of the space, standing in front of that presbyter of God's tribe, and said, and me. He, chuckling softly, the space suddenly tightened, directly binding the elder. The elder formed a seal with his hands and unleashed his power. Boom! He spat out a mouthful of blood, but it also broke the spatial shackles, causing him to stagger backwards, staring at Murong Xiong, and said, Murong Xiong, count you in. Don't leave today if you dare. Murong Xiong laughed. If I don't leave, then you will die. Presbyter of God's tribe squinted. With a light wave of his hand, the powerhouse walked out. All of a sudden, number of people who could safely crush God's tribe in the morning. The God's tribe guards who were surrounding Long Fei were immediately blocked and were forced back step by step. Presbyter of God's tribe said, a traitor to the God's tribe, a waste who only knows how to forge artifacts, and a Xiao Yao city. Very good, very good. Bam! On another side of God's design attic, he kicked the door and flew out. And lousy, Xiao Bai transformed into the White Wolf King and was the first to rush out. The people of God's tribe were stunned once again. Remnants of the western regions' escape. Ice and Fire came out. Tentapeo walked out. Elder Swordsman, Tang Long, Senior Mia, Su Su, Lon Mei, Queen of Blood Moon. Everyone came out. Long Fei couldn't help but become excited as he looked at them. Ha! It's all here, it's all here. Boss! A loud sound was heard. This time, they directly surrounded the God's tribe and forced them together. There was no fear on Presbyter of God's tribe's face as he coldly said, everyone is here, just nice. We can catch them all in one fell swoop. None of you can leave today. Long Fei, today is the day of your death. Not waiting for him to finish. Suddenly, his throat was cut and blood spurted out. The other presbyter of God's tribe's eyes narrowed and immediately shouted, there's an assassin. Just as he shouted out, his neck also ruptured. 3 of the elders suddenly died. Even Murong Xiong was secretly shocked. He could not clearly see what had happened. The 3 Yimei sisters walked out, looked at Long Fei, and said, Lord Night King. Long Fei said, beautiful. After 1 year, my assassination skill has improved a lot. 3 of the presbyter of God's tribe died instantly. The rest of the people's faces darkened. An elder said heavily, today, none of you will be able to escape. Shrine has already sent Powerhouse over. All of you must die. Ha! All of you will die. None of you will be able to escape. Murong Xiong's gaze tightened and his heart skipped a beat. If Shrine really sends someone. An unrivaled existence in the God's tribe. The Powerhouse sent out by the Shrine were all very powerful. If they knew that Long Fei was here, they would have definitely sent out their strongest warriors. This place was dangerous. The presbyter of God's tribe said coldly, just you wait. They will be here soon. Let's see how you can continue being so arrogant then. At this moment, in the sky, a young Taoist suddenly flew down. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.